I'd like it to be on the record that maybe we could put in the budget for new chairs up here someday.
It's 2025.
Okay, you think the council would, they spend more time in the meeting. They don't ever do.
I guess we just have more durable butts
I
than.
guess so. You guys are just sitting on them more. It's not bad. All right, we'll call this meeting to order. Could I please get a roll call attendance? Is everybody here? No, Mr. Lisk.
He's on Zoom.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Foister,
Here.
Lisk. I see you there.
He's on mute.
He's muted.
Nelson,
Here.
Petroselli,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Meyer,
Here.
Mayor Clark,
Here.
and Chairperson Montague.
here. Bill, when you are back on mic, let us know that you're here just for the record. I wasn't late, I just wasn't early. The first item of business is a public hearing, application and lot consolidation. Solar Ranches number 2D lot 68 through 70, address TBD Sabita Drive, 820 Sabita Drive, and TBD Sabita Drive. Zone is residential, applicant is Patrick and Deborah Willits, and that is also the owner. And I will hand it over to TJ, who is here. Or there. Anyway.
Good evening, everyone. Let's see if I can get share. Am I sharing the right screen?
See it.
Oh, wrong button.
We did see it. One button. There it is.
There we go. All right. So good evening, everyone.
Evening.
There we go. I gotta pin you all up. There we go. All right. So let's see how to make this thing happen. There we go. So thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. As you mentioned, we're have in front of you all this evening a lot consolidation to combine 3 lots into 1 lot. Based on the last, the major code update we did last year, this is now a new application type, and the purview is with you all, the Planning Commission, to make the final decision on this. So you're sitting a little bit differently this evening, not as a recommending body. And as you mentioned too, it's a public hearing. So we'll go through our typical public hearing protocols here this evening. We'll start with, and it's been a little bit since we've had one, I think. So start with staff presentation. The applicant, I believe, is there in the room to give a presentation, and then we'll have open it up to the public comment before a decision is made there at the end. So I'm gonna I tried hard to make this detailed and arduous and kind of whatnot, but it's really not. So I gave more detail in the application or in the staff report. I'm going to go over a pretty high level here. In this, it is a pretty straightforward application, I believe. And so we'll just kind of touch on some of the high points. As you can see on this slide, the subject properties, these 3 current properties currently owned by the same individuals, Patrick and Deborah Willits. Their home is right there in the middle lot, 820 Sabata Drive. And it is low density residential, but also within the Solar Ranches PUD, at least filing 2D PUD. There is the existing home, as I mentioned, on lot 69. Nothing is proposed to be changed as far as construction at the moment. No access, no utilities, no other additional development except for the combination of the 3 lots into 1. So within both the PUD and the HR zone districts were, I'm sorry, that should be residential zone districts, standards were evaluated, and it meets all of the minimum standards. We did not review the existing structure on the building, on the lot to see if it was in compliance, because this is not looking at the structure itself. None of the setbacks are changing, none of the property components are changing. So it's existing as would be. So as mentioned, you all are sitting as a decision-making body this evening. Section 742I3 gives you the approval criteria. And here they are. You need to find that all three of those are met in order to approve the request. And then your options this evening are to approve with conditions, deny, or continue the request. So following the review, and this, again, there's a lot more detail hopefully in the staff report, but staff has reviewed against the applicable criteria and recommend that the planning commission approve the lot consolidation, finding that all the criteria in 752I3 have been met, with one condition, and that condition being that the plat be updated to address all referral comments and be reviewed by the town prior to recording the lot consolidation plat with Uray County Clerk and Recorders. We did include all of the comments received, and just due to timing, we have not been able to review any resubmittals. So we just want to make sure that all of those are being addressed. Most of those are, as if you've read them, are pretty clerical in nature. Make sure that they're consistent with the standards for the town, standard language, things like that. So we didn't feel that there was too much subjectivity to to the conditions. So we have a recommended motion here, as well as some alternatives if the planning commission did want to move in the direction of a denial or additional conditions. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have, or turn it on over to the applicant to give a presentation as well.
Do you guys have any questions?
I guess the only one I've got is the one that TJ had in here as well, is the 69R versus 69A. If we're recommending approval, are we referring to it as 69R as it says?
Yeah, I think, oh, sorry. I think that that's adequate. You know, that's what you have in front of you. If it does change, it's going to be kind of in the record. And so we would, but I think the R will probably change, it would stay.
And we would be approving it. We're not recommending it because the codes changed and now we approve these things.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, we're ready for the applicant.
As we talked, I was in before you last fall, talking about, we were beginning this process.
You just state your name for the record.
That's Pat Willits, and I live at 820 Sabata Drive.
Thanks.
So as the presentation shows, in our view, it's somewhat straightforward. We have 3 lots, contiguous lots. We have been using the 3 contiguous lots in a sense. I felt like it's like one property, one house, and the county assessor until this year recognized for tax assessment purposes, and he gave us all 3 lots as a residential tax, in the residential tax bracket. This year, in addition to what we all encountered was this increase in property taxes, we heard from the county assessor that the state was also changing the criteria by which neighboring adjacent lots could be assessed by the county assessor as residential, and that if we did not go through the process that we're going through, our lots would become assessed as vacant land. The savings for us this year. Fortunately, the assessor, we told the assessor we're going through this process. Susan Mayfield said, okay, I'll keep the assessment as it's been. We were able to actually compare then when we got our tax bill. That the difference, the savings for us by going through this process is about $6,000 a year. It's the property taxes for vacant land are just astronomical. So, and it's in keeping with what we want to do. We have had conversation with town staff that the day may come in the future where we would want to reverse this process for one of the lots. And we understand that that's not a foregone conclusion that we would, that we would be approved for doing that, but the day may come, but we don't see that being within a couple of years, so that's why we wanted to go through this process. And that's why we're here, and I think we've complied with everything and subject to your approval.
Thanks. Do the commissioners have any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure CPS recommended to add a 10-inch utility easement. Is that something that's pretty easy? You should,
What's the brick? I'm sorry.
recommended to add a 10-foot utility.
No, as a matter of fact, and TJ hasn't had a chance to review it yet. Our surveyor, Foley Surveying, has provided the town with a plat that we think we're waiting for his review, but they were able to add that to the review. All the conditions we think that were laid out in TJ's memo, we have our surveyor has added to the plat. TJ just hasn't had a chance to review it.
The only comment I had, and it's interesting that you said that about considering maybe undoing the process for one of the lots in the future, is just the thing that we've talked about for years now, which is going towards higher density in order to meet the town's workforce housing needs. And this proposal is going against that in some ways, but I think it makes sense, certainly makes sense financially, without a doubt. So
Yeah.
I'm sort of glad to hear that you're open to maybe reversing that. I
Yeah.
can see where one of your kids might want to build a house on one of the neighboring lots.
Yeah, that's the hope, and we're driven to this because of the tax situation. And and we aren't ready to build yet. And honestly, it was a factor we were thinking about. Because not only has property values gone up, but the cost of construction has gone up too, so we're wrestling with that. But I fully expect there will be a day in the future where we'll come back. And it's knowing that the town's policy, and I'm very supportive of that town policy, by the way. It's just that, I guess we're fortunate that we live where we live in that part of town. We've been able to acquire the 2 lots that we have over the years. So that's where we're.
Great, makes sense to me.
I'm going to open it to public comment if there's no more questions from commissioners. All right, the meeting's open to public comment. Do we have any public that wishes to comment?
You folks on Zoom.
Nobody with their hand up. If you don't know how to raise your hand, you want to just unmute and speak, you're welcome to.
I'm going to close public comment.
Jonathan tried to unmute himself. Just check.
Oh, yeah, thanks for noticing. I was just gonna thank you all for opening it via Zoom. I'm a neighbor, was just curious to know what was going on. Thank you for making this public. No comment.
Thank you.
Okay, closing public comment. Any further discussion?
I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Approve the lot consolidation for lot 69R, filing number 2D, Solar Ranches. Finding that the criteria set forth in RMC 752I3 have been met with the following condition. The plat may be updated to address all referral comments and be reviewed by the town prior to recording the lot consolidation plat with the Erie County clerk and recorder.
I'll second that.
Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Commissioner Forster,
I,
Commissioner Lisk,
Aye.
Nelson,
I,
Petroselli,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Meyer,
Aye.
Mayor Clark,
Aye.
and Chairperson Montague.
Aye,
All right, unanimous.
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, here we go into a work session. Everybody ready? Fasten your seatbelt. It looks like the first item, we'll see, maybe TJ wants to mix it up. The first one listed here is ADUs. Probably because that's gonna be the most challenging, so we'll do that first while we're all still fresh.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'll also just mention that somewhat obvious, Max, unfortunately, well, I guess fortunately, was able to take some vacation and is not this evening, so you're stuck with me. So, yeah, thanks, Chair, and I think we'll start with, again, similarly to last month, we want to kind of break these up a little bit into separate conversations so we can keep a focused conversation on each. And we will start with the ADUs. So, and I am not sharing my, am I sharing my screen? Can you hear me?
Yes, you are.
Mhm.
Excellent. Oh, whoa, hey, look at that. Technology I didn't even know I did. So, again, we tried to lay it all out in a somewhat concise memo with the red lines. And just as a note, the red lines that were provided are based on the current code, not necessarily on the last versions that we all looked at. So I know that might be kind of tough to keep the versions in the head straight. So, but just kind of a quick overview, you know, we started this conversation back in February and March, talked through some of what we wanted to see, and then we had a really great dialogue last month. I will say this, that we did go back, listen to the tapes, watch the video of this conversation, but I can almost guarantee you that we didn't catch everything. So I'm looking forward to this conversation here on this. So again, tonight, what we're looking to do is kind of have that targeted conversation on the updates specifically. So we will walk through only what we've updated since last meeting. But by all means, you know, if there are other things, let us know and we can dive into each of those. So just a quick overview of the areas that we've updated for this evening. A lot of it had to do with the construction standards and the sustainability practices that we talked about a little bit last time, rolling back some of that, those requirements, adjusted the square footage requirements for how many ADUs are permitted. And we kind of, again, rolled those back a little bit based on some of the scenarios that we threw out there last month. Amended the maximum square footage for an ADU from, you know, we had bounced around a few times, but we've gone back, not back, but a flat maximum square footage of 1,000 square feet in the current version. And this is where maybe Max and I think we're on different wavelengths on this, and so by all means, let us know if we've missed the boat a little bit. But I think what we heard last time was take away all the incentives to reduce setbacks. Setbacks was not going to be a major contributor, and probably going to be costing more than it's worth based on fire code and other construction standards. So we removed all incentives to reduce setbacks. You know, we also increased the AMI threshold. Now this one may, well, the standard may stay there. It may move as we start also articulating the affordable housing section, this may be relocated somewhere else, but again, we just wanted to point out that we did increase the threshold for the AMI. And then we did some tweaking of the incentives for water conservation in there to not necessarily require landscaping improvements per se, but focus those a little bit more on other community goals. Clarified the plan review fee reduction, so those being that it was only plan review fee, not the permit fee. And we'll talk maybe a little bit more about those if needed. We tweaked the owner occupancy requirements a little bit in a couple different ways, and then we also added that 90-day. This is another one where I think Max and I were kind of going back and forth and not sure exactly where the commission landed on it, but we added a 90-day lease requirement in there, and if nothing else through all of these, hopefully we've set the framework, and now it's just adjusting some numbers or applicability across certain things. So diving into some of the more the larger ones, this first one here was the alternative, encouraging alternative methods of construction. In this provision here, 1B, kind of if you're following along, just to kind of back up, the whole section is 746A. So I put the whole reference in there, but I'm going to kind of speak to that 1B component and that level. So we tried to kind of broaden that a little bit. There was conversation about what makes a material local and things like that. And, I guess we were really just talking that it kind of needs to be accessible, cheaper, not necessarily the material itself or where it comes from per se, but really we're looking at an affordable component of it. So we don't want to create too much of a challenge between those two ideas. And again, we removed the incentive for setback reduction in that section as well.
So TJ,
Yep.
I'd like to talk about that for a second. Am I interrupting?
Nope, by all means.
So we were just thinking about this setback reduction, and I'm not really in favor of it, only in one instance that I've thought of. But for instance, in Solar Ranch, there are literally 40 or 50 houses that back up to open space. And in River Park, there's probably more than 50 houses that back up to open space. And in my opinion, that would be a good place to offer a setback reduction because it doesn't really have an impact on a neighbor. And for instance, I think in Solar Ranch, might be wrong about this, but in Solar Ranch, I think there's an 8-foot setback from open space. And I know there's an 8-foot setback from open space in River Park. So you have all the houses on Escalante, all the houses on River Park that are one lot deep, and then a significant open space, and then another lot on the other side. So I personally think it would be appropriate to apply some type of setback variance when it's on open space, not abutting another neighbor. And that's really the only place I think it's appropriate.
It sounds reasonable.
Yeah, because we talked about, when density increases, not imposing neighbor on neighbors. So I agree.
Yeah,
You're not talking about attaching an incentive to that, or you were just
Just allowing it, I mean, if it makes sense, yeah, I spoke out adamantly against reducing the setbacks on the last meeting, but I've kind of recooked it in my brain, and I think it's appropriate there. It makes for a better ADU, it makes for better views, it's a open space, it's a setback that I don't think serves as any function at all. And so I'd like to bring that up to the commission for discussion, and I don't know how we could incentivize it or allow it or how we want to do that. It just seems like it's appropriate.
It seems like you just put the language in that says when the setback borders open space, it can be considered or, go from there, but that
works-
seems pretty clear cut.
That works for me.
I'm trying to find, I don't believe that Solar Ranch has a specific setback.
I believe it does, Jim.
If they do,
It's been 25 years, but I believe it does.
If it does, it's just in the HOA docs, not in the town regs, is that right?
I think it's in the, when Robert did that, it was 8-foot setbacks, all 15 in front, 8-foot all the way around, that's the way I remember it, and I doubt it's changed, but I could remember it wrong. But also, and I just thought, think about, Parkside's got, we got 5 lots, 6 lots on open space, and they're allowed ADUs, so I kind of, might have should have prepared for this a little bit better, but there's a bunch of lots, over 100 lots in town that border open space that could have ADUs, and I think removing the setback from open space is appropriate.
I don't disagree, I'm just trying to figure out where it is.
It's probably a plat that would be a development agreement.
Yeah,
When Solar Ranch was done, everything was flat notes, Johnny.
Yeah, I know, I remember that, and I'm just saying like the table T 4.4 in the dimensional standard requirements, there is no, the rear setback is 8 feet, but it's 8 feet everywhere in town.
Yeah,
But interesting, so that
I mean,
it's almost like, what I'm getting at is, it's almost like we should consider separate from this discussion, a town-wide, ordinance-wide adjustment for lots that abut open space.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's what we're talking about.
I think it's,
part of the ADU discussion, it's actually more of a general
well,
town ordinance
I
discussion.
didn't want to climb too tall a ladder here, but I agree with that 100%. When we're talking about ADUs, I'll bring that up, but I think setting back from open, well, there could be times when it's appropriate, but I like to maximize the view of the open space, and setting back from it, I think is ill-conceived.
TJ, what do you think? Just in general, the idea that maybe having I was just unclear. I think what I was thinking of is in the platted part of town, the rear setback, when it's on an alley, is just 2 feet.
Yeah,
But everywhere else, it's 8 feet. I think it might warrant an ordinance amendment that would say when the lot abuts an open space in the rear, it could be 4 feet, or it could be 6 feet or something. I don't think it would go to 2, but it could be less than 8. I think it's a separate discussion.
As long as that open space is a designated open space that won't ever be changed into something else.
well, I think all the open spaces I know of are designated, they're platted open
And
spaces.
the term is actually dedicated, not designated.
Well, actually, some are HOA owned and some are owned by the town.
Okay.
Like Parkside, for some reason, Parkside owns the open space. In River Park, which connects the HOA owns it. It's weird,
Interesting.
but it's true. And so, but they're both platted, maybe not. Well, they're dedicated to the HOA or to the town.
Yeah, I'd say
They're
as
not
long
going
as,
to be changed.
yeah, as long as they're dedicated to an entity other than the neighboring property owners.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Sorry, I didn't give you a chance to.
And I think it's the same way in Vista Terrace.
Well, this is just how it is.
I know, but they're still open space.
Oh, yeah.
And
Go ahead,
that
TJ.
could change.
Yeah, that's a interesting concept. I'm struggling with in my brain, how do we tie it to an incentive for an ADU?
I don't think it needs to be. That's not what we're
Right.
saying.
No, I agree. And I'm just kind of going through my thought process on this.
Right.
And then as I'm trying to think through where it might go, and I'm wondering if maybe for some of the reasons that were already brought up, this could get quite complex and be either be very, very complex in the code and very prescriptive, or be way too lax. So I'm wondering if maybe a better way to look at it is increase the administrative adjustment allowance for areas that are adjacent, the setbacks that are adjacent to platted open space, something like that. That then it gives a little bit more flexibility and leeway and analysis, if you will, but kind of also confines it a little bit more. So I think that if that's truly the intent there, I think that makes sense. I think that it makes more sense kind of across the board. You know, again, I haven't really analyzed it or thought through it too much, but it makes more sense that way than it does tied to an incentive for an ADU.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be incentivized. I just think there's 8 feet there that needs to be used. If we're thinking about smaller lots, we need that 8 feet.
I think there's consensus here that we should look at that, but it doesn't need to be part of the ADU discussion because it's a larger issue. I like your approach, TJ, of making it administratively processed.
So I'll offer, I mean, planning commission has a pretty specific charge here with ADU standards, parking standards, affordable housing, development mix, and I would recommend we get through that, and then every budget cycle, we revisit those buckets. I don't really know why TJ called them buckets, but he did. The buckets of code. Visit, and we can make a note to throw that in there, maybe some dimensional standard conversations adjacent to open space. I think that's really good stuff that we can think about for
One of the next
go around.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Put a pin in it.
Well, I think we should do it now if we're doing it. I mean, I think there's people, we're trying to incentivize them, and there's people that would be interested in building them on the open space. I don't understand why we can't include it in this ordinance.
Because it's not
It's a
the
lot
place.
better than ADU standards, but that's my.
Well, I brought it up just for ADUs. If we want to make it broader, then we're open to the ordinance.
Well, okay, so
Oh, you know,
hearing that, no, I'm willing to discuss. Of course, we don't want to be here all night, but maybe have it be initially just allowable for ADUs that are going to be at the back of the lot.
So
Place to
do we
start.
just, or do we just say they can apply it a variance, you know, when they bring their project to us? If it,
But what we're talking about doing is making it actually specific to ADUs.
Because we eliminated the setbacks based on the conversations we had last time.
Well, it's
And now
the
Jack-
incentives. We
Yeah.
didn't get rid of the
So we're saying, put it back for that specific.
Except for it's still, I'm not comfortable with it being an incentive necessarily.
Maybe it doesn't need to be an incentive, maybe it's just part of it.
no, I'm just saying, if they want to do that.
Yeah,
well, I
They
think
bring it
it's,
to us when they-
I'm agreeing with Jack's take that this whole point of this discussion is to try to
get more ADUs.
get more ADUs, and on some of these smaller lots that abut an open space, it'd be nice for them to be able to use a little bit more of the lot.
I think that's the incentive.
Yeah.
I think that's the incentive. We don't,
It's
it's
well-
monetary.
Except for in terms of what we've been talking about, incentives are things that, they basically get more square footage or something like that.
That, it was one of the incentives and we took it out.
I know, but I'm saying it, I guess it just depends on how you want to.
I don't see it as an
Incentive.
incentive. It's just
So,
part of it.
If I may, section 2 in the ADU standards, the new update is dimensional and design standards. We can add, just for simplistic sake, add a new H. It just says that setbacks may be reduced by up to 50% on property lines adjacent to platted open space as may be approved or authorized by the town manager or designee. And just kind of,
Perfect.
That works for me.
I thought we were gonna eliminate them. Cut them in half.
Well, that.
No, we're not eliminating that. I'm not in favor of that. Cutting them in half is.
so
fine.
it's not an incentive, it's a design standard or a
Yeah.
dimensional standard that reduces basically the setback adjacent
Yeah,
to.
Jack was saying, he was imagining we were actually eliminating the setback altogether, but I'm not comfortable.
No, and I like that you use the word may be altered,
Makes sense?
not guaranteed.
That sounds good to me too.
Setback may be reduced by up to.
That's maybe. Doesn't sound like that.
No, it's too quick. He knows.
I think that is a good compromise.
I think everybody's happy. Are we,
Yeah, I think 2 feet on an alleyway, it should be 0 on open space, but I'm not gonna fight. think the 4-foot setback and all.
Zero would mean that they could actually build right on the property line on the open space, and I think that's too,
They have to be able to plow
that's
snow.
too impactful.
Yeah, I think you need some, at least a couple of feet to get drainage, et cetera. Yeah, I don't think you want to have a zero setback.
Couple of feet less than 4.
Okay, we can look into that, and I just added this kind of a clause to it that says, and no less than X feet, so. We can look at that. Cool, I think that is a good, like everyone's saying, a good compromise in that. Okay. So,
Still in the incentives section,
sorry, what was that?
are we still on the incentives section?
Well, no, we're going through kind of topics. We're not going through kind of top to bottom. But if you want,
Okay. Well, I had a question, or did you? Michelle?
I can wait till the end, or I can share it now. What do you want to do, TJ?
throw it at me. Let's see what we got.
On incentives, D, income verification, I don't like the idea of leaving it up to the tenant determining. I think we should outline a process, maybe not in this document, but at some point. It seems like leaving it, that leaves it kind of wide open to all different types of interpretations.
So where are you?
Income
She
verification,
moved down to 3 incentives, 3 AIE.
Oh, gotcha.
She skipped up.
Incentive verification and rent limits provide the method for determining tenant income. Yeah. I mean, we'll have provisions too. So
The way I read that is that
Yeah.
the method for determining the tenant income and calculating rent limitations is still up in the air. It needs to be developed.
okay,
Yeah, that's why I read it.
That we're gonna have income verification and rent limitations, but how that's done is
okay,
still to be
I'm
determined.
fine with that.
yeah, it needs to be agreed upon by the town as well, right? So it's not just yep, this is how we're gonna do it. I'm gonna give it to my friend. Right.
I had a question, and I thought it was in section 3. There was a section, and I know I can't find it. It was about income restricted. You could have 2,000 square foot, 1,000 square foot ADUs. But I wondered if that then allowed the possibility of it overriding the dimension standards of the lot.
Still have the lot cover ratio.
Yeah, it has to still.
Okay.
That's that
Okay,
trumps all.
great,
We haven't
okay,
changed it.
okay. And then you said 90 days. Did we agree on 90, or I thought it was 120?
Yeah, I think we agreed on
90? Okay,
Well, in our opinion, that's potentially still out there. You know, Max, I don't know that we ever said, yep, this is what we're gonna land on. So, but at least we have it drafted in there and we can get to that
I think
conversation.
90 is the minimum
uh-huh.
that we agreed on. I mean, we kicked it around. I think 90 was the least that we agreed on.
I think there was some debate as to whether 120 would be better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard, and I was.
I just brought it up because you said it when you were talking earlier.
Yep, and I have that language up here. I just jumped
Yeah.
ahead a slide that says that.
Can we go back to design standard, dimensional and design standards? I just need some clarification.
Okay.
On number IV or 4 there. The total number of ADUs on the subject property shall never exceed double the total number of dwelling units in the principal structure. What does that mean, dwelling units in the principal structure?
So that means if it's a duplex, that's 2, so you can never have more than 4, no matter how large the property is, and no matter how many incentives.
And
If
if
it's
if it's just one house, then it's 280.
it's two. Yep.
Okay, good enough. Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, and what's a site triangle? What does that mean?
It's oh, I can't remember exactly how it's measured here, but it's basically a distance that if you think about it, it's the easiest way to think about it is you're sitting at in your vehicle at a stop sign trying to look both ways down the street to see vehicles coming, making sure that it's not in that. And it's measured usually from property lines,
I think
15
it's
feet,
15
20.
feet, because the property is 15 setbacks. I think it was 15 feet.
So specifically corner lots with
Yeah.
streets intersecting, right?
You can't sit in the corner, you have.
You can see an example of that, I believe, over on Frederick and North Cora, where they just put up a big metal fence along Frederick, but when they got to the corner, it has to be see-through, and I'm guessing that was site plan. And you can see it very clearly when you pull up to that corner, like, wait a minute, they changed materials on the fence, and that's the reason, and I believe the same is true on the alley of that lot,
Yeah, that's a good
There's-
example.
right?
There's site plan for CDOT, they require that, I mean, you have to be able to see both ways at the corner, even when, I've gotten a ticket from CDOT, not CDOT, was another entity for my hedges.
Okay,
And they were hedges.
I'm just trying to make sure I understood what we were referencing. So,
I think it was 30 feet or so, they want you to be able to clear sight.
TJ, can I suggest that I know you prepared a bunch of, bullet points for us here, but maybe we should just kind of start at the top and go down
Yeah.
to it.
That's what I was just kind of thinking myself. So,
I mean, we can hit on your bullet points along the way, but
yeah, no, that's fine.
So I have another one, landscape plan. 7462G. Shall be required for all new detached ADUs. And then similar to that, I saw another thing that said in 74683B that you couldn't have turf. So I kind of had a little concern with that one. I know we're trying to keep turf to a minimum, but at the same time, what if people have pets? Dogs like turf a lot better in the rocks.
true that.
And so, you know, I'm not trying to promote turf, but I'm not trying to say we can't have any.
Yeah, a lot of places are going to like max 3,000 square feet of turf. I think.
Yeah, this was A3B. It said no turf time.
For some reason, I thought
A3B.
we could have
So-
20%.
Russ, is this it right here? That
Yeah.
I and II?
Yeah,
Yeah, I in particular, and then just, the other one about a landscape plan for an ADU, for a detached ADU. I mean, I don't know how much area we're actually getting these things, but I would have thought that the landscape plan for the entire, for the lot would apply for the ADU as well. I guess is what I was trying to understand.
I think if I'm understanding what you're saying, there's plenty of properties around town that the home's been there forever, never had a landscape plan. It might not meet the landscape plan now. They put up an ADU, they have to all of a sudden come up with a landscape.
Okay, so it's still specific to the entire lot, it's not just.
That's the way I read it, is that if you build an ADU on a lot that's never had a landscape plan because it's old and established, if you build an ADU, you gotta submit a plan for the whole property.
Yes.
How do you separate it out? How do you?
That's how our current landscape regs read it, for any structures, even accessory dwelling units or anything else accessory.
I mean,
It just, the way it's written, it makes it sound like you have to provide that landscape plan specific to the ADU. It's like, well, that seems odd, but I understand the reference.
I think it's, TJ can correct me, I think it pertains more to lots with existing single family homes or existing dwelling units on the property. It wouldn't apply if someone has a vacant parcel and is pulling a permit for a primary dwelling dwelling unit and an ADU. Landscape plan would be encompassed within that one building. DJ, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's correct. You might remember when we did the landscaping regs a few years ago. We did decide to apply those to new single family and duplex residential properties as well. And then we put a provision that it would apply to any remodels or expansions that include 50% of the area or more. And so what we're saying here is that we're adding basically another provision to that. And if we want to remove it, we've dialed it back from what we had last time too. If we do want to remove it, so what we're saying is that yes, across town, whatever is there today, if it's a single family home, a duplex, and somebody wants to do an ADU separate from a full new construction project, it would require a landscape plan that would bring the entire property up to current landscape regulations.
Okay, I mean, that makes sense, just the way I read it, it made it sound like if I was putting in an ADU, I had to do a landscape plan specific to the ADU.
And maybe what we do is, how about this? What if we said, or consistent with an approved landscape plan?
Sure.
And that would hopefully at least clarify that if you already have one, you just need to comply with it. If you don't, you need to submit a new one.
That works.
I have a question on double I in the landscape section where it says the non-live ground cover shall exclude artificial turf, and I just wondered why.
Because what we wanted to do in this particular case is incentivize, the idea was to increase the water-wise component and the water conservation. So we went a step further from the current regulations and basically didn't allow turf.
But it's
Why don't you
artificial
allow
turf.
Artificial turf.
And the artificial turf, that's not necessarily what we're trying to get at with the non-live either, right? It would be more
what's your
mulch, rock, that kind of stuff that would be.
What's your bias against artificial turf? In comparison to rock, because a lot of people would rather have artificial turf than rock. I mean, I'm honestly not a big fan because it's just more plastic, but a lot of people, they make some pretty nice artificial turf.
They're making some real nice.
But its life isn't very long.
You can create a
creates
play space
UV.
for kids.
It
Recycled.
I mean, there's advantages to it. I think 3B, I and II are both a little problematic. I think we need to make I allow some square footage of actual turf, like maximum of 2,000 or 3,000 square feet of actual turf, or to address resident concern. And then I don't know, I'm tossed up. I personally, for myself, would rather not allow artificial turf. I think it's problematic, but a lot of people would disagree with me on that, so I'm open to discussion.
Why do you see it as problematic? I mean,
It's plastic.
but it's recycled plastic, so it's better
But
than
it,
just
but
plastic.
it deteriorates and becomes microplastics. It's just the last thing this world needs is more plastic. Whether
Well, it's not more plastic, it's I just want a playground at a homeless shelter would get a lot of money for plastic playground.
You're making my point, is that it's a debate. And I have one opinion, you have another, and I'm.
No, I don't have an opinion, I'm questioning it, so don't misinterpret it as an opinion. And what we were required to do it for a homeless shelter for the playground by state regs. And
Well, I think
was against it.
there's a big difference between Trex and artificial turf.
This wasn't Trex, this was rubber that they could fall off the trampoline and hit it and be safe. So it was a safety issue, which I really had trouble digesting. So, but we did it, had to dig it, had to put base in. And
It's
we
what
have
the town's
8 inches.
talking about doing for, we would do
Yeah.
that. And people have already written and saying we should, don't want us to do that. So it's, I mean, I think the point is that it's a debate. It's a question of whether it's,
So
really worth
maybe
doing.
allow it as, consider it as a part of a feature, but not an entire lawn.
Yeah,
Well, right now,
Maybe,
right now in our regulations, it says right here, 776, non-live ground cover is considered, and it has a whole bunch of things listed, and then it says artificial turf or the like.
So,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah,
Now,
so if I may just put it a little bit context, because thank you for that, Jennifer. That is the current regulation. The current regulation does allow it to meet the standard. You could do that. What we're saying here is that if you want an additional to increase your maximum floor area by 10%, just by right, your landscaping incentive would be these two things. So don't put any turf, and you can increase, right? That increases the water efficiency.
so if
Now, I fully understand and can see the issue with the non-live not including artificial turf, but the idea here is that this 80% is an increase in non-live. So again, to reduce the water water use. So this is to get to what you would do on your landscape plan above and beyond what's currently required or the standards are, to get an incentive to increase your square footage of your ADU. I don't know if that helps or hurts the conversation,
It helps,
but
It does.
because if you're asking for something extra, then
right,
the conditions are stronger.
correct.
so we could have a maximum of 1,100 square foot that way?
Yes.
Yeah, yep.
One more possible.
It's a big call. So what do we think? I mean,
If there are incentives, then I suppose that's okay, as long as it's not. a
Yeah,
requirement.
we're good, let's go.
Chair wants to move on.
And if we find these to become problematic, we can change them in the future, correct?
Of course, yep.
Turn it,
I mean, that's-
God.
I don't mind making a mistake here. I think not doing anything is a mistake.
So kind of sticking to the incentive section here. Are we okay with this affordable house? Let's see here, what was this note? I don't know why that keeps moving on me. All right, well. What else? Let's go back to the top and start.
No.
Let's see.
One, general provisions. Let's just kind of
Right.
do it by section here.
And do you have, I don't have anything else highlighted in there. Does anybody else, or do you have anything else in your points?
Yeah, I don't think we need to necessarily go down through them all. We give us a chance for anybody who's got questions. I guess the only other one I had was down at 4B. So that's gonna be closer to the end. I'm trying to remember what our reasoning was on the change of must to may. And if you can just kind of spark my memory for me.
On ownership,
I had that mark too. So we're at
on 4 on ownership,
4B, where it says the ADU may be owned together.
I highlighted that too.
Principal residential unit in the lot or parcel upon there located.
I was guessing that we probably said something last.
Yeah, why does it say may?
Change, but
Yeah, I'm wondering if we actually changed this last time from must to may, and then after our conversation, we changed it back to must. And because remember, we were talking originally about allowing the subdivision of properties, but what we're saying now.
so I guess who this is gonna affect to some extent, potentially, we have people here in town who have multiple rental units. Potentially, and so would that affect them if they had an ADU and a primary house on the lot that they didn't live in, but they owned both of those, and that was part of their income to rent those, be it on a long-term or short-term basis if they have the license.
I think,
That's where I would see the impact.
yeah, I think, you know, I've struggled with this. I really say, I'm really opposed to some rich Texan coming in and buying 10 houses and 10 ADUs. I mean, that's really not what I want, and they're doing that in Ridgway, and I see it in the real estate business, and that's, I mean, we want to create housing, but I don't want to create that kind of housing. I might be short-sighted.
I'm not arguing with you.
No, I'm not arguing. I'm just saying I've always felt that this board was trying to create affordable housing, and we wanted owner to be present. And I think we've been adamant about that for many years. And
I think
I'm not
we
sure that-
talked about the owner didn't necessarily have to live in the primary residence, but they did have to be a resident of this town, not just have a second
Oh, I
home.
thought that'd be on site. One
That
of the two.
Originally, they had to be on site.
Originally, they had to be on site.
And I think what we've talked about in the drafting of this is removing that requirement. But I thought we were keeping the requirement that they have to be owned by the same person. It's, to me, if they're not, if we allow somebody to separate off their ADU, it's not an ADU anymore.
I agree. I
I
agree.
agree.
But I hadn't thought, honestly, Jack, I hadn't thought about your point of, you know, developers coming in, speculative real estate people and buying a whole bunch of property
Oh, yeah.
and building a bunch of
Yeah.
ADUs and owning, I mean, they would meet the must requirement, but they don't, so many of them that it would be kind of slow land.
And I'm not sure that I'm really against that if they live in town. I mean, so I think we need to think through that. I think that's a frightening door that we're opening here. So I see if they're
Potentially is.
right.
I like the idea of that they have to live here. They can't be absentee.
But they can't have a management company either.
Right.
You know, we need to come up with a good solution there, but I think.
TJ, are you getting enough of a sense of what our debate is here?
Oh, well, kind of. I mean, they're two separate things. One, we're talking about ownership, and the other, we're talking about occupancy.
Right.
So let's just finish this one up here. B, that the ADU may be owned. I just looked at the last version. This was our previous version back in April. We had this same edit. I think what we did last month, and this is just something that we missed on our end. This went back to must.
Correct.
So,
We
Yes.
all agree about that, I think.
you can't separate out ownership.
Yeah, I think the discussion centered around the fact that ADUs will not have, in most cases, will not have any amount of frontage if we actually separated them. They might have access to the alley, but they have no frontage. And that sort of struck that down. I think we decided.
So, in chewing through this, I think that my fear of a, for lack of a better word, a rich absentee landlord coming in from California, Texas and buying 10 houses and putting up 10 ADUs. I think I would recommend this committee and direct that investor to build an apartment and not buy 10 houses. And I think that's our challenge. Instead of him having 10 houses and 10 ADUs, we should have him invest his money differently.
So how do we disincentivize the ability for somebody to do that? To do the 10 houses and 10 ADUs?
I think we're on it. I think ownership, I think living in town is as far as I'd stretch it. They'd have to live in town, not manage
We
property.
may have to say Ridgway County, but the point being that they have to be a full-time resident, not a part-time seasonal, come for the summer.
And then we get into definitions of that and,
Yeah,
I mean, it's tricky. But I agree wholeheartedly. We need to do, if we're gonna remove the requirement that one of the buildings, either the ADU or the primary structure, be owner occupied, we have to figure out an alternative to that that still maintains the intent of keeping that from becoming slum.
Yeah,
I'll make it simple. I'm uncomfortable with removing the ownership on site. And until we come up with a better solution, I'm gonna vote to keep the motion. So
I'm not, I think that's a good
it's
solution.
safe,
It's a simpler solution for sure.
it's
And I-
safe, and then we can change it.
So let me ask, where did, I don't remember where the motivation came to remove the requirement that one of the units on the property must.
We were talking about subdividing off.
I think it had more to do with just, incentivizing doing it at all. If we made it so that somebody had to be, the owner had to be in one of the buildings, they're less likely to do it. If they don't have to own, they don't have to live in one of the buildings, they're more likely to build ADUs. Which sort of gets to immediately to your point, Jack, of somebody coming in and doing a whole bunch of them. But I think I'm okay with, going back and sticking with that one of the structures has to be open.
And this is currently in our regs.
Yeah, that's the way it is now.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to remember why did we scratch
I
that?
thought we talked about trying to create more housing, and that if someone wanted to rent it and
Who's gonna want to create more ADUs? I mean, there's a ADU. for-
instead of something sitting vacant, wasn't that the conversation?
Well, but there's no incentive to build an ADU and have one of the units.
What if it's already built, it's already sitting there?
I can tell you that I had looked at properties in town with an ADU, but I couldn't buy it because I already had a place to live. I wasn't looking to move. I was looking to invest in
Okay,
residential housing,
Yep.
and I would have lived here. I do live here, but
You would have
I would have bought it, but I didn't need.
I think you're the exception to the.
Right, and the problem would be that somebody comes in and buys a second home, says that,
Right.
moves their driver's license here, then hires Joe Blow Management Company.
I get it.
It'd be easy to trick that system.
Totally get it.
My feeling is we don't get that much advantage out of removing that owner occupied requirement.
Well, I think part of the job, sorry, but part of the reason it was struck maybe is I made a comment at the last meeting about this is currently in place and it's not enforced. And I think about all the time, the ADUs that have been constructed. I don't even know that the town has ever had a system to verify the property owner when the ADUs are constructed that or get confirmation that the property owner plans to live either in the primary dwelling unit or in the ADU. We certainly don't have a system in place when properties change hands
Okay, TJ, there's a job for you.
to verify that the person in California trying to buy a second home, just an example, is planning to live in that unit or on the property.
Or even knows what the regs are, knows
Or
that
even
they can't.
exact-
Well, and again, I've seen so many second homeowners that, how much time they spend in one place or another over the course of 5 years. You gotta have a definition for what primary residence is, and it typically would be more than 6 months.
I think where this has kind of got lost a little bit is this reg is not a cloud on title, if you will, like when properties change hands, folks aren't skimming every line in the Ridgway Municipal Code to understand, oh, I can't buy this place unless I plan to live in Ridgway and I live in Iowa. If there was a plat note or something, or something else, when the property is changing hands, that cloud on title, if you will, that's where real estate brokers, people buying the properties kind of catch that.
That's public notice, that's where it should be, they don't catch it, but that's what it needs to be shown.
So to me, that's a job for TJ or town staff to research ways other communities have done that, address that issue. Because obviously there are places that are figured out a little bit.
Well, like he said, instead of educating realtors,
Good luck.
I
I think we could do it when somebody pulls a permit for a new ADU, we could control it at that permitting process, but then when it changes hands, that becomes much more different.
That's effectively what
Well,
I'm trying to control it and trying to get a handle on it during the permitting process. Karen and Mike can attest to that. It's just when it changes hands, that's the point I'm trying.
I mean, is there a way to plat note it through the building permit process? Is there a way to make it a condition? I don't,
not unless we require them do something that requires a plat.
Maybe we could have them sign a letter, then we'll record it. Yeah, that's what we could do, is we could have them make an agreement with them for that ADU, and then we can record it for $7 on their title, and then it's full public
That is
disclosure.
attached to the title.
That's actually a great idea.
It's cheap.
It's actually. And then,
Not to, bring us in a whole different direction, but this is eerily similar to the conversation we had last time on the opposite side, where the reason we struck it was that by requiring any kind of occupancy, we limited the ability for more housing. And that was the reason that we went back and forth on this.
Say that again, we limited the ability what?
For more housing. Because, and if I may, because what we landed on last time, and again, things change and that's fine, but just to kind of go back to it, that we have other safeguards, if you will, in place to ensure that these are both either affordable or at least long-term leases. So they're going to be long-term leases, not short-term. And it was meeting some of those missing middle, those smaller residential homes. And that's why because originally we did have an occupancy in here, and actually we went against Preston, myself and Max, who said that it was going to be a difficult charge to enforce, and we threw it out there for the conversation, and then it got nixed because it was going to be very expensive, plus it limited, very hard to enforce, plus limiting the amount of housing that was going to be available. And so if we want to go back, that's fine. But I want to remind everybody of that. Actually, my memory is bad in a lot of cases, but this.
Thank you.
Can I play the devil's advocate for a
Sure.
second?
Yeah.
So limiting the housing that's available, we're talking then new housing. Because it's not like somebody's not already living,
Correct.
right? So we're talking about new. I think that it's equally as important, if not more so, in maintaining the community character to have the people living in one of those structures that was living there to begin with.
I agree 100%.
Right.
So I think we're going down a slippery slope if we're just like saying we need more new housing opportunities. So let's incentivize a person who lives here now to stop living here and move somewhere else and make money off the 2 units instead of just the one. It's complicated, but, and as an aside, don't we get some enforcement potential through the water and sewer billing system? Because we know who owns the assessor, we can find out who owns the property. Right. We know whose name the water and sewer bills in.
We might not know
So
who's
the person
living
who
there.
owns the property.
We might not know who's living.
yeah, but yeah, that's,
Okay, so I see that. So the owner could still be paying the water and sewer bill, but.
They are.
But
Owners in LLC.
but they're renting the unit, you can't tell whether they're renting.
No.
It's a really interesting enforcement challenge, isn't it? And I wonder how other communities.
I've talked about it dozens of
Are we
times.
overreacting here? We just want to create units. I like the owner occupancy stuff, but maybe we should loosen it up and see what happens. I mean,
I'd rather
like
keep
the
it the way it
community.
is.
I mean, I wouldn't want her to be able to buy.
Yeah,
So I'm kind of
I would
sitting,
have done it.
and so I'm sitting here answering my own question, sitting next to her. It's kind of weird.
Right. I keep forgetting that you're sitting back there, and I just want to encourage you to speak up and give us your thoughts if you ever want to. Don't feel like this is a closed discussion.
It's a working session, but
You're welcome to speak up.
Thank you very much.
But is there a way that we could get a local to be able to buy this? And maybe living in town works. A long-term resident in town, not a part-time resident. How to control that, I don't know.
Well, let's have Preston and TJ put a pin in this, TJ and say what options do we have for requiring the owner to live in the county? Say, is that even
They full-time in the county.
how do we enforce that? But if it's possible, I'm okay with that.
And just a side note here on Zoom, and I'm not sure since I'm sharing if you guys can see it, but Sheldon Kerr has her hand up, and so I want to kind of. I don't. I'm assuming you're Sheldon.
May I?
Yes, of course.
Hey there, I live on South Laura Street and I own my house and we have an ADU in the back that we rent out to a local. And as I'm listening, I suppose I just wanted to throw a couple thoughts out there. That right now, someone else who is on Zoom right now does fit that description of someone from a great person from California who has come and they just bought a house in Solar Ranch and they have an ADU. And what they'd like to do is be able to have that home as a second home, and they'd like to be able to rent out the ADU to a local. And I think some of the discussion right now would perhaps point us in the direction of that not being allowed, which seems like what we don't
It's
want.
totally allowed.
No, it's not.
They couldn't have their house as a second home and rent their ADU.
Oh.
Yes, they could. No, what we're talking about is that you couldn't rent both. You couldn't rent both the ADU and the main structure.
And it seems what I was listening to was that it seems that what matters is whether there are people that live here that work here that have a place to live. And right now, let's say that second homeowner wants to rent out that main house. I don't see how, if they're doing a long-term rental, what I see is that just putting another housing opportunity on the market, and that seems positive to me.
That's,
If
yeah,
it's a second home, do they ever use it?
They want to put a long-term lease in second.
And so they want to put a lease on the larger, on the house and not occupy it?
And they,
Yeah, let's say that someone gets sick and they're not going to be able to use that house for a few years and they want to rent it out long term. That seems like a opportunity to have more local housing. And by saying that it needs to be owner occupied, we're actually cutting down the number of opportunities for housing rather than putting more out there.
What if
Yeah.
the AMI came into play? What if it had to be, they had to meet requirements like we have,
that's interesting.
you know?
Yeah, Sheldon, just to respond, what you're describing is exactly why the draft sits the way it does right now, and even though we're talking about changing it back. The discussion,
I want you to keep it how it is. I think it's good.
I understand,
Yeah,
I understand.
our concern is how do we find the sweet spot between providing as much workforce housing as possible and maintain the integrity of the community and not have absentee owners?
And disincentivize speculative investors from coming in and buying large quantities of property and doing these things. Maybe that's not a bad thing in the scenario that Sheldon's pointing out, that as long as it's housing that's going to locals, what difference? I don't know, that's a debate.
so what we just said is we.
Yeah, it does seem, as I listen to you all, that the thoughts you've put together in regards to AMI could indeed be sort of a stronger solution than requiring owner occupancy. So I suppose I just wanted to chime in and say that I do think that AMI is something that's really worth thinking about, and that I really appreciate the amount of thought that you all are putting into this, because yeah, I just want to, like you, maintain the character and think more housing is good.
Great,
So thank you.
I think that's a pretty good
Likewise.
idea there. If it was not owner occupied, the length of the leases change. The requirement.
That's
So-
kind of where my mind's going, and maybe we can just Preston and I and some others and Max can sharpen the pencil on it. But I'm wondering if we have the standard, if you will, be that one of the dwelling units on the property must be and remain owner occupied, right? That's kind of the standard. But then the incentive is that if you have both of them meeting certain affordable housing components, they can be not.
I like that.
That works.
I think that's really hard to
It's hard to-
manage.
Hard to manage.
I mean, no matter what we do down this path is going to be extremely difficult to manage, and we're going to have some issue one way or another.
Enforce.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think though, if we incentivize, again, thinking about it, doing a standard for what we want, ideally, and then providing incentives for what we'd really like, we might be able to strike some balance there.
And then figure out how to enforce it.
Yeah,
So for now, we're gonna leave it as must be owned together. And we're maintaining that one property must be owner occupied.
How about if they,
And I guess you want to add some?
I'm sorry, can I just get clarification on the discussion that was related to the full-time versus part-time residency? You're saying owner occupied, but must be full-time.
So right now, if you have an ADU, the primary house must be owner occupied full-time.
No,
As a
no.
primary home, as a.
One or the other.
One or the
So
other.
it can be rented. You don't have to live there. It could sit empty.
As a,
You can only rent one.
yes.
Okay, I think I heard what Sheldon heard, which was that the primary residence needed to be full-time occupancy in order to rent the ADU.
No, you can only rent one or the other.
It does say owner occupied, I just don't think we enforce how long we have.
Yeah, we don't have.
There's no way.
Your question, what's your name, I'm sorry.
Lisa,
I don't think you
Lisa.
can.
Your question's about the definition between, or the threshold between part-time and full-time.
well, I think it's just in relation to renting an ADU, where does full-time occupancy fall in there?
It doesn't, it really doesn't.
But you were talking.
We were talking about that because we were just debating how
we talk about that a lot.
how we
Second home ownership is discussed there a lot.
It's just too hard to enforce, but it's definitely something we'd like to figure out because of the issue. I mean, we could really get into the weeds that in a lot of places, we already are. In a lot of places, second homeowners aren't even looked at negatively because they tend to provide economic benefit without a lot of draw on services. They're not here all the time, so they don't need services.
They want to hear to spend money.
So it's always been a debate.
We struggle with it.
We have another hand up on Zoom too.
But is that clear? What we're saying is one, you could rent, you could live, have the ADU empty and never come and rent your main house and you're okay.
You're supposed to live in one deal.
I think it was just trying to understand where full-time occupancy came in as a defining factor for whether you could or couldn't rent an ADU.
Not.
It's more just that the owner has to, the property owner has to own one of the pieces, and whether they're there full-time or part-time doesn't really matter because we can't enforce
But
it.
they can't rent out both.
They can't rent out both. But the current draft is sitting where you can rent out both.
We've talked about not having part-time residents be allowed to have ADUs, and we abandoned that. We've talked about it at length. We've talked about part-time residents putting restrictions on it because we need a housing, not part-time housing. So we talk about that a lot, but we never made it enforce. It's impossible to enforce, and we're not sure we think we're down the road.
But the risks to the community integrity and character, if you have absentee landowners and landlords, is a concern.
We're worried about the community impact of the absentee landlord.
Understood, thanks.
Kristen had her hand up. Kristen, do you still want to speak? I've seen your hand go up and down a couple times.
Well, I sure, thank you. I was hesitating to speak because I think you all have covered it and I don't want to hit this ad nauseum, but I do, if I like that TJ added the clause of considering incentives should both units be rented to make sure that AMI is considered and that the housing stays affordable. That is the
I think we
consideration.
all like that. Yeah, we all like that one.
Like that's the way to address it.
And if I may butt back in, I think that the threat that I think is a bigger threat to the character of the community is not the absentee landlord, but the empty house.
So how about if they wanted to rent both, they have a variance process, they come and talk to us about.
I think we can make it administrative, but
Yeah.
tying it to AMI requirements is I think the answer, if we can enforce it.
But it'd be, I mean, it'd be, just thinking out loud, it would be similar to deed restriction enforcement would require, monthly or quarterly check-ins to ensure that the same people were living there and such, and the town is not currently set up to do that. We would probably need to rely on like the home trustee or county or some other entity to do that. Again, I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking, if we're gonna have, thinking out loud, if we have a minimum 90-day lease and both of them are leased for 90 days, I think if both of them are leased, the 90 days should be bumped to a year. And that makes me more comfortable. So if you have an ADU that's leased out in 90 days and a main structure leased out in 90 days, it's not what we're trying to achieve. If one of those had to be a minimum of a year, if they were gonna lease both of them had to be a year, something would help us.
But again, you can't manage that.
Right. I agree.
So I think, TJ, we've thrown a bunch of stuff at you. I think the Jack's idea of a letter that gets recorded when people do ADUs, I don't know how we address current ADUs, but we just try to deal with it as it comes, I guess.
Maybe the title companies would have some suggestions.
If it's recorded, the title company should see it.
Yeah, if the
But it'd be not even just for new build, but also.
I know, that's,
yeah.
I don't know how
But
we could require it, we could, I mean, when you do that kind of thing, that you're putting in a new regulation that affects existing properties that haven't changed anything, the way you usually do it is you grandfather it until something changes, until they make a change to their property, and then they have to come into compliance.
I think we have to come to a decision before we record it. We're talking about how we record it, but we haven't even decided what we're doing.
The letter just
Provided the regulations change in the way we're talking, and we would implement a system.
I think TJ.
I don't think you can make it written.
All right, we gotta keep going, guys, and we're gonna be.
here all night. Yeah. It's a good discussion.
Yeah, I think I'm hearing it. Best I got is go back to the drawing board. So we'll come back with something.
So good at drawing.
A couple of different things. Yeah, no, I like where it's going. Okay.
I had a question about item number 6 under that section incentives 36A I. The ADU plans, two pre-approved ADU building plans are as follows. I don't understand where we came up with those square footage numbers. If we're allowing up to 1,000 square feet, exactly, that's what I'm looking at. Why do we have it at 750 for ADU plan B? Shouldn't that be 1,000?
Or
Well,
seven.
kind of, at this point, we left this pre-approved plan thing alone, just because we need to, I think what we realized was that, yes, this is gonna happen, but we're not gonna know this until we go out and we're gonna have to go to RFP to get this, so this may go away in this version, just because we might not be able to finalize this.
Okay, minor point, we can move on.
And my only addition to that was, I mean, it's easy to fix just to say 750 to 1,000 square feet. And just that whenever we do research this, I think we all like the pre-approved plans, just that the company has enough options so that every unit doesn't look the same.
Yeah, and I think the 500 and 750 had for the pre-approved plans had the focus on affordability, and I don't think we want to require someone to build 1,000 square
That's a
foot.
good point. I think we can move on that one.
I had a question on that as well, and that 500 seems really small. Are we really investing in that as one of the pre-approved plans? It almost seems like a non-offer. Like here we have this one that probably no one's gonna use.
You can do 500 square foot, one bedroom, it's small, 600 is better. I've done
You can do a
500.
studio for 500.
But that's where we're landing on for the pre-approved plans that we want to do.
No, no, we're not. Just to be clear, this section did not change because we decided last time that we need to go out to bid. We
Right.
need to go get an RFP for an architect to help design these in some capacity. So this whole section is going, the idea of us coming up with pre-approved ADUs is certainly something. But the rest of it will just be dictated by whatever we come up with through the process.
We're getting too in the weeds by worrying about the numbers.
Yeah.
Kristen, I see you've got your hand up again. If your comment is about this, we've just agreed that the numbers are not something we need to debate right now. But if you have something you want to add, you can.
I just want to add that I live in a ADU that is less than 500 square feet. I have multiple friends that rent ADUs that are less than 500 square feet, and it is plenty of room for a single human. And I also think, I guess I would say that I would like to have two different options, one for a family and one for a single person, and 500 square feet is more than enough living space when we start to consider this.
Great point. I agree. If we were going to go on discussing this, I was going to mention how many people live in even smaller than that in like New York City and stuff.
I'm looking at
We're not used to
square
that.
foot studio.
I think we all agree on that. Thank you. I have one other point on ADUs and then maybe we can move on to the next item. And I just want to make sure we're all in agreement that we have addressed the short-term rental issue by scratching which one it's one of the, it's 11. We've totally scratched the last bit in red that addressed whether you could do a short-term rental by meeting these other criteria. Do we all agree that ADU should never be short-term rental?
I agree. Yes, 100%.
I just wanted to confirm.
Yeah.
Earlier, we were adamant.
Okay.
Let's do that again.
I had one other question on utilities. And just the wording, the accessory dwelling unit shall be served off of the same water or sewer tap for the principal residence. I thought that was only if you don't want to pay additional tap fees.
No, I think we had said, because we were trying to make it
That's the
cheaper and
idea
easier
behind an ADU.
for the homeowner to do this.
Right, but what if there's some reason where it can't be?
Yeah, I think she's right about that.
I don't think it says, I don't think it should be shall be. I think it's if you want to.
Should be.
Well,
If you
I
want to.
totally disagree. I think the whole point of the ADUs is that you save having to pay for the additional tax.
With an incentive, but if there's some geographical or physical barrier that they can't do that.
Yeah, like what if you
shouldn't
can't
disallow
go
the
under
ADU.
the main house to tap into it? What if
So-
it's not accessible?
So when
Why
you're,
would anyone do an ADU and have to pay thousands, like $12,000 for taps?
Because they want to build an ADU and they can't access the sewer because it's
Because they can,
higher, the front house is higher. And they'd have to put in a pump, they couldn't get to it.
not sure
I got a
It's an
perfect example
interesting-
on Charles Street where you couldn't get to the sewer in the front of the house because the lot slopes downhill. And it's a really long distance.
I just don't see how it's
Sure.
affordable then to do an ADU if you can't.
but if they want to
Figure
do
out the
it, they
existing
can
water.
come to us and ask.
we're not requiring it, Charlie, we're just saying we're eliminating the ability for them to build an ADU because they can't tap off the house. And she's suggesting that we don't eliminate their ability to do it.
I suppose that's okay. It just seems.
It's expensive, but it's
seems-
not
Yeah,
an
it's
option.
expensive, but it's an option. if
I
you
agree
can't-
with Michelle.
Yeah,
I agree with Michelle. I mean, if there could be a physical barrier like
Exactly.
crate or
or a really long distance uphill.
underground rock. I mean, it
Rock.
happens.
Rock.
And in that
Gas
case, you all-
line.
And in that case, you all would advocate for the property owner to not have to pay that system investment fee?
No, we didn't
No.
say that.
If a new tap is needed, if
They had to,
If they're not able to physically hook up to the existing water and sewer tap, these guys are saying, we're not saying that they can't buy another water and sewer tap and build an ADU. I just don't see it ever happening.
I don't think it ever happened, but I want it to be available.
I can see what.
said it, they would have to purchase the new tap.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's.
So purchasing the new tap is gonna be less expensive than hooking up to the old tap. and however that happens.
So I agree, if you think that's a possibility.
Yeah, I don't think $12,000 tap fee would make it financially that you couldn't build an ADU. You know what it costs to build an ADU these days?
Yeah, I do.
$12,000. That's not gonna make it or break.
Sore subject.
But can we just put it as it is, and if they ask for a variance, then we assess it?
Then they have to come and
We just change that one word.
application and come and meet with the planning commission and be,
That wouldn't be ineligible. Variance for a variance. A variance is on dimension.
The way to do it is to change the word shall to should or may.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's the,
I don't know.
I'm
how
just trying not to
it's in the code.
make it so burdensome and complex that.
I mean, I think it's currently in the code, it's basically an incentive, it basically says,
Okay,
when you build an ADU, you don't have to buy a water and sewer tap, it doesn't say you have to.
So it should say, may.
Right.
may be served off the water and sewer tap for the principal residence, in which case it's, yeah, exactly. That's it.
Doesn't require it to be served off that water.
Can I throw another wrench in the system?
well, go ahead, yeah.
I think, you know, the word shall and shalls and mays should not be taken lightly in these codes, and I think you hit on this, but I think that this is still what we want to do, right? We want to require, except for exceptionally difficult or burdensome situations, they shall be served off of the same tap for all the reasons that we just talked about. I'm thinking through all the different ways in the process that the code that currently allow, you know, deviations and evaluations of things. What if we just put an I after A that said that due to any hardship or burden, unforeseen burden, an applicant or property owner may request a waiver from this provision
Right.
by the planning commission, and just leave it at that.
At their own expense.
Oh.
I don't think you need to say that, it's become.
I think that's right. I mean, there's some real steep lots in River Park that might be able to be serviced off the back, and it might be cheaper to pay $12,000 than to run a line down a cliff. And I think some of those situations already exist.
I like
I don't think you
TJ's
should have to come
approach.
to the planning commission for it. I think it could be at staff level.
Yeah, it can be administratively done, right, TJ?
Yeah, I would think so. I would think that we could do that. And we can work on the language of it, but I think if we just put a subsection under there, this is that this particular thing can be waived for, you know,
I'm
exceptional.
fine with that,
Something.
That's good compromise.
but something.
The boss is fine with it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, did we get through ADUs?
That's it. That's all I had.
Dang.
All right.
Based on that, we'll be here till 10.
Yeah.
So anyways, as painful as that was, I think
It's
we
good.
decided on a lot of things. We're getting closer, right? There's a few things out there,
Good discussion. I think we do a bang up.
but we're narrowing it down.
I think we do an excellent.
You just, yeah, my hair's on fire.
People make my head hurt. It's okay.
I'm sorry.
I'm just really glad that we record these so that we could follow up later.
You'd be like, you guys changed your mind again. It wasn't our mistake.
Okay,
Max is always really good. He says, well, that's a great question. That's a good point.
parking.
All right, on to parking.
This is about done, isn't it?
All right, parking, this should be, I'm gonna go back to my topical conversation. And if we need to dive back into the code, we can, but
I don't even have any notes on this.
okay.
I have a couple.
So generally what we did since last time is we updated the parking table to, if you will, the whole progression of this went from, we evaluated the 2018 assessment. It said the town is 400% overparked. We cut everything by, 25%. And then basically cut those in half. It was basically 75%. Cut everything in by a quarter, and then basically brought it back up. So we basically cut today's requirements in half. So it's still a very good kind of solution that might be more palatable we removed any maximum requirements. We clarified which uses don't require off-street parking, and there was some concern there last time. We adjusted some definitions and terms, and specifically to, daycare facilities and educational facilities. We did some reorganizing of the whole section itself, just to try to read a little bit better. And then we clarified that on-street parking requirements for single family and duplex uses, how those work. And I can't remember if we actually go through that in this presentation or not, but anyways, so I'm not going to go through each of these. These are just, you saw some of the strike throughs and everything. One of the questions, and I'm going to talk about this second bullet, the shared parking requirement for single family and duplex. This was, I think, confusion and more maybe in the structure of the code that single family and duplex units shouldn't ever need a parking plan per se. But let's see if I can remember the thought process we went through quite a bit. That because there was some questions about, in I believe the HR zone district, of not requiring off-street parking for single family and duplex. Most of the existing homes do not, and they're smaller lots, so we didn't want to disincentivize that. Thinking through using the same methodology we were just talking about, the idea is to create the standard that we want across the board, and then provide for deviation or allowances in certain situations, special situations. So that was one of the clarifications we did. There we go. It's right here. So this first bullet, that in the HR zone, backing up a second, single family and duplex units require 2 off-street parking spaces per unit. So a single family home requires 2 off-street parking spaces. There is a provision in the standards table that one of those 2 may be allowed on street. Okay, so we've already reduced that across the board to 1 off-street parking space. Then what we've further said in the HR zone district is that residential uses may utilize on-street parking to meet all of the parking requirements. And so my reasoning here, I see the thumbs up, Russ, thanks, is again, we don't want to not have minimum requirements. We want to allow incentives in the places that make the most sense. So we haven't gotten rid of the requirement of off-street parking. We've just allowed it to be met in different ways. Okay, does that make sense?
Well, I don't know how, if you have off-street parking requirements that can be met on the street or off-street parking requirements, but.
We're allowing on-street parking to meet off-street parking requirements in certain situations. Okay. I thought there was one other thing that I wanted to talk through on this.
You're getting tired, do you need to check it? Yeah.
So the last thing here is that, one of the big concerns with this was, oh shoot, someone's going to come in, reduce their parking to pretty much nothing, and then it's going to sell, and we're going to have a parking problem. But piggybacking off of what I just said, so we went through this scenario, and we'll talk through this scenario in just a second. But the concept is that there are always going to be minimum parking requirements that need to be met. Okay, so we're not getting rid of parking requirements. We're just allowing multiple avenues to meet those parking requirements. Okay. And so by this example here, So you can see the site that Max chose over there off of Sherman. No real reason, we just took a property. It's located in the C zone district, GC, 6,000 multi-tenant retail space. The current code requires 24 parking spaces. The proposed code would require 12 parking spaces. Okay, so it does reduce it, but the market would still drive if they felt they needed more. The applicant builds the multi-tenant retail space, proposes to reduce the parking required to make space for amenities or feature or more square footage. So in this example on the right side, the current code, or the left side, the current code doesn't allow any deviation or flexibility in that. So they would be required to build 24 parking spaces. In the new code, they could actually build 8 by having 4 spaces, 4 motorcycle spaces, and then some bicycle spaces. And I thought he was going to do something with a parking plan, but then let's say that then they receive through the site plan process that approval with kind of the different ways of meeting the parking requirements, and then the property sells. It still has those in there, and if it's the same use, it would be allowed to do that. But if it comes in with a different use, it would require a site plan. And at that time, we would evaluate the parking requirements based on the new proposed use. And the new proposed use requires 23 parking spaces, more than they required in the first place. So it's changing from, let's just say, a retail to a restaurant use that would require more parking. The applicant could reduce, they could still use those same 8 spaces, but then also come up essentially with a shared parking plan that allows for other spaces off-site and other properties that are within walking distance or provide different connections to other areas to meet those parking requirements. So the parking requirements are not going away. It's just how you meet them that would be flexible.
And as a reminder, they were cut in half or less, and we're backing off of that, but we're trying to be progressive with this parking thing. TJ came to us and said, this is a national trend, there's too much parking, and so we're trying to be forward thinking and take his advice on doing this, so stay open-minded, people.
I think I need to own some of this. I mean, TJ, I was adamantly, or I was the one that was brought up the proponent of the Dollar General being changed to apartments, but I think the fact that we'll address a new use eliminates my concern. So if Dollar General is required to have 5, just for sake of example, and then it goes away or gets foreclosed on or have a new owner and they want to do apartments there, the new use will require a site plan. I'm comfortable.
There's new jobs coming.
But if,
John, you're a little behind on some other news. Let me think of it.
I just want to throw out, your first page of this, says a updated parking table to slightly increase the overall minimum parking requirements. I think everybody here probably knows by now that I'm a big proponent of greatly reducing parking requirements, and I don't know that we agreed to basically double what the first proposal was. In other words, go from 1 space per 100 square feet to 1 space per 200 square feet in restaurants, and go from 1 space per 300 square feet for office space to 600 feet. Now, retail establishments go from 250 to 500. Are we going too far back in the other direction, or is everybody comfortable with these numbers?
I'm fine if it's controlled by the use with the site plan. So I didn't want to go to the extreme reduction in the last meeting because I was worried about that, but if a change in use has to come through the process and be reevaluated parking, I'm fine with it.
You're fine with the original numbers?
Yes.
And wait a minute, so we cut them to like a quarter of what they were a while ago, and now we've come back to where? Half of where they were? Approximately?
Correct.
So cutting them by half instead of a quarter. You want
I
to
just
think
want to
more,
have it just,
John?
I just want to have it just, I just want to make sure, I just think this is one of the biggest areas where, and again, it gets into affordability. People have to build parking lots, things are more expensive. And I think we have more parking than people think we have. Whenever we have a big event, we're always going to be overbooked.
Yeah.
There's just no way.
Like TJ said, that's a good problem.
Yeah, so I just wanted to bring it up and make sure everybody was comfortable.
I'm pretty happy going with his recommendation. A quarter seemed a little bit like, whoa, what if the national trend is wrong? And backing off of that, you know, maybe a
I
third.
was
Maybe
gonna
a third
argue, I
was
was gonna
fine.
argue for 3/8 or a quarter.
Yeah, maybe a third is the
I'm
plan, you
comfortable
know?
with John's approach to this. I mean,
Yeah.
I think if John wants to reduce it to a
Let's go
minimum,
to-
I'm okay with it as long as we have the review and process when the use changes.
Should we, as a compromise, go to 3/8 or a third? We can do that, yeah.
And again, with the seconds, I agree with that.
I like the idea of requiring full parking for houses and hotels. Because that's where we want them to put the car. And then if there's less parking for the store, the whatever, the community center, whatever, then they will hopefully walk or take their bicycle.
I think that's getting too detailed. I don't think that takes into all the factors that come into play and that I don't know that we want to dice it up that way. I think we go with TJ's recommendation, and if we're not comfortable with the quarter, then we come back a little.
Well, it looks to me like, under hotels and motels, which is
Yeah.
what you were saying.
Yeah.
We didn't change that. It's one space per one room.
And that, yeah,
And I agree with you. I think that should stay one space per one room. But everything else could be tweaked back down a little bit.
And similarly, we didn't change the dwelling unit counts either.
yeah, well, you said a duplex used to require, or the residential used to require,
So it still does. Single family and duplex requires 2 spaces. Everything else requires 1. That's current. And
One could be on street.
but you
what
said.
we're saying is that 1 for single family and duplex could be allowed on street. And then further, and if that's what you're suggesting and wanting, we can certainly take that provision out if so desired, so that you do have to have 2 off street. And then we could put the provision, because again, the idea was that the HR zone district would allow all off-street parking to be met on street.
Yeah, I'm thinking I'm gonna throw a wrench in here and I don't mean to, but my biggest concern when I see this being is when my neighbor short-term rents their house and they show up with 5 pickups, pulling 5 Jeeps. And so I'm okay with the reduced parking requirements for long-term uses, but I think we should have another parking requirement for short-term rentals.
Interesting. Yeah.
We do.
I've seen 12 Jeeps on my street that were staying in 2 houses. And all those were towed by pickups with trailers. Yeah. Overwhelming. And I asked them to park them remotely and they did, and they're very cooperative, but it's just, like, holy cow.
Boy, how do we deal with that, TJ?
I'm sorry?
How do we deal with that?
I think short-term rentals should have a different parking requirement.
Well, and
Yeah, but the problem is
so
when-
right now, this is short-term rental and we're not changing this. The unit shall have a minimum of 2 off-street parking spaces available and any additional spaces necessary to accommodate the tenant's vehicles off-street. So I would suggest that the use will be the final dictator of the parking requirements and different standards, right? So if you have a short-term rental, those provisions would prevail, provided they're more strict than others. Now, the problem is that you could get approved as an ADU, as we've already talked about, specifically with the utilities, and then switch it over to short-term rental down the road. That we could never address. But I think that what the concern that you're bringing up right now is a good one, and we have it addressed there. The good part about the positive of a short-term rental is that they do require a license, and I think some administration and inspection. So there's a means to enforce that through that process. So I think, at least provided that B stays in there, that I just read, that it shall have a minimum 2 off-street parking spaces for the unit plus additionals.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that a short-term rental should have 4 off-street parking places. And what I mean by that is that the garage needs to be empty. So if the garage is full and the 2 are in front of the garage and they short-term rent it, there's no parking spaces. So I'm a proponent of having 4 off-street parking places.
The problem with differentiating residential with short-term residential is that the licenses move. So
Yeah,
house
it's not a
A,
permanent thing.
no,
Yeah, it's not in place when the house is built.
right, you sell the house, I don't want a permit, you buy the house, oh, I want a permit.
Well, then they have to meet that requirement.
You have to meet the performance standards, right, for a license.
I mean, it is their license, so that gives us a lot of control.
Yeah.
I mean, Montrose building new houses, they wouldn't allow us to have, to count the garage as off-street parking because they said the garage is always full of junk. So the 2 off-street parking places have to be met exclusive of the garage.
4 seems like a lot, Jack.
Well, I'm adamant.
I know you have a personal experience, but
We don't have to decide tonight.
Yeah,
I think short-term rentals have the highest parking impact of all the uses in the neighborhood.
They certainly can.
but the permits move. I
I
just,
don't understand the permits. I mean, if you have a permit, you're gonna be inspected and you have to meet that performance standard. If you have 4 off-street parking places or not, the permit's not gonna move next door without being inspected. I don't understand the concern.
The licensing system gives us a lot.
They're licensed, they're inspected, and they're re-inspected.
say you need 4 off-street parking places.
Is it
That's big. That's easier than doing a tax.
Inspected, and to get a
But shut it down.
meet all performance standards, you wouldn't be granted a license if you didn't meet that parking standard. But enforcement's a different deal. We don't know who people are renting to, if there are issues, you've got to be made aware. So that we can follow up appropriately.
Enforcement happens by complaint.
Yeah.
For most things.
Anyways, where were we?
Short-term rental parking requirements.
Oh, Jesus.
I think we had an agreement before I brought up the short-term parking requirement, so I think we're at it done.
Open to considering in the next draft, a short-term rental parking requirement that would be part of the performance standards for short-term rental licenses.
Yep, and I mean, would be pretty simple, right? Because
Yeah.
it's just changing one number.
But that's big. Like, you're gonna tell somebody if you can't provide 3 off-street parking places, you can't short-term rent your place?
Yes,
I think we also should tie it to how many people they say their short-term rental place supports. If it's just a 2-person short-term rental, then
Yeah.
it would be 2 spots.
So.
Or they say how many vehicles are allowed when they rent it, but you can't enforce that.
We find the rare book, just have possible.
I have a question for Karen. Do you need a short-term rental permit to rent a room in your house short-term? For anything?
That's owner occupied.
It doesn't count against the cap.
Correct.
In-house ADUs are require a permit, but they don't count against the 50.
So you still pay like the
It's
sales
$300,
tax
yeah.
and the union.
I think it's fine.
How much is the license? $300, check out? 400.
And we don't have any licenses available. correct?
No, we have 4.
We do, okay, good.
So can I read the performance standard for short-term rentals specific to parking? The unit shall have a minimum of 2 off-street parking spaces available and any additional spaces necessary to accommodate the tenant's vehicles off-street. I think it is.
That covers it. That covers it.
It's already accounted.
So you just got to call and complain.
We just need to be made aware.
Yeah, that covers it.
Okay. Well, here we go. We might be finishing another section. Dun, dun, dun. Drum roll, please. Where's the band?
I guess the only follow-up I had on this, it says that they're supposed to provide any additional spaces, but in the scenario he talks about, where you've got 4 pickup trucks with trailers, okay, they may be able to fit all the Jeeps in there, but what are they supposed to do with the trucks and trailers? The owner is actually supposed to have a lot for them to put it in, or?
Well, the owner needs to be responsible. They can put the trailer in public parking. There's ways to deal with it if we have a responsible property owner. If their property owner is absentee or doesn't give a flip, then they're all on the street. But for instance, in our case, I spoke to the people, they're real nice. I said, why don't you ditch your trailers down behind the library? And they did.
I think this is just an opinion now. I think it would be the license holder's responsibility via the reservation process to pose a question or understand how many vehicles are you gonna have. Oh, you're gonna have 14 trucks with trailers and hauling everything. Oh, well, this isn't the place for you.
And then the neighbors would file a complaint against that licensee and they track it.
Right. We would track that. We would follow.
So I think it's covered. Thank you, Preston.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make another point. I see that bus stations are crossed off. And I just wanted to point out that we just put up a bus stop in front of the dollar store. And I'm not sure where the buses go, but don't people have to maybe drive to the bus stop and then go get on the bus if they're going to Grand Junction? Or like I said, I don't know where the buses go. Is that for people who are walking, or are they are the buses going where we need parking for the buses? So somebody can drive to the bus stop and they're going to Durango on the bus, or I guess I'm trying to ask, like, should we have someplace where people can park for the bus?
Yeah, I was surprised that the buses didn't go to the road at the back of the Chamber of Commerce building.
Yeah, that's an entirely separate issue. We've been dealing with CDOT over the years, and because it's hard, depending on the day, to get in and out of that parking lot for safety reasons. The Mustang stop has transitioned over to Palomino, which is where Jennifer's talking about.
I understand. I've walked to that bus stop and waited for the bus. But I was able to walk there.
Did you go to Brandon?
No. And that's also where the new Year Ray shuttle comes as well.
Yeah, the Our Way shuttle stops there on Palomino going one way, and the fairgrounds lot going the other way.
Yeah.
I just know RTD has parking for their buses.
Right. Can people park on that street?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a problem for down the road. I mean, it's a concern, but I think for our current size, I think it's not a big issue. It's probably something we need to, strategic plan or something to better address bus parking as the usage grows.
The only thing I noticed was number 2. When it mentions gross floor area, it's measured along the outside enclosing walls, and we need to change that to inside.
No, not on this one. This one, the gross area is measured externally.
Yeah, the internal one is for ADUs, the gross one is for parking.
Thank you.
We're gonna get through this one fast.
Yeah.
We can hold it.
Question about bicycle parking. Let's see, all properties located within 2,000 feet of the Uncompahgre River Trail or other designated areas. I remember when the Riverside townhouses were being permitted, the public has to maintain access to the river. So are we saying? I'm just confused and asking for clarification. Are we requiring them to have bicycle spaces?
You're talking about Riverfront Village?
Yeah.
I don't know off the top of my head, they're conforming to the current regs as they relate to, I don't think we have anything in our code, TJ, for bicycle station.
I don't think we did back then.
I might suggest that under bicycle parking, FI, where it says all properties located within 2,000 feet of the Uncompahgre Riverway Trail, instead of Uncompahgre Riverway Trail, it should say any town designated trail.
I agree with that.
That was the purpose.
Yeah, because I mean, the trail that's gonna go in, it's gonna extend along the Riverfront Village property should be included and all the trails.
Yeah, any future trail should be included.
Well, then they would be grandfathered, they would be subject
Yeah.
to that. We could try to talk with them about it.
Yeah, no, I'm not, I understand that. I'm just saying, in the future, any property that's being developed near a town trail should be included. So I think, because the problem with the Uncompahgre Riverway Trail, it technically just starts at the Trestle Bridge, basically, or that parking lot next to Sampa. But the trails go through town, and so I think we should make that more generally apply to town trails.
Okay, yeah, and we have in there other designated.
Oh, that's true, that's true.
But we can clarify that,
Sorry, I missed that.
How we doing?
Anybody else have any clarity? We good on parking for them?
Yeah, I think.
I think so.
Moving on.
all right.
This next one's scary.
Cinematics.
Thanks for the warning, Russ.
But it's exciting.
Oh, that was lengthy. I actually was on the Tired Housing Authority when we created the developer mitigation plan. So I read that you quoted Telluride quite a lot. This is a big deal.
Yeah, this one could take us a couple of hours.
It should have been done like 10 years ago.
So before we dive in too deep into it, I'll just set the stage that says, we're at the very, very beginning of this one in particular, right? A lot of work has already been done too. And so our charge on this is not to come up with a whole bunch of new affordable housing programs per se, right? And that's not what we're looking to do at the moment. We're looking at concepts and how to incorporate it into the code. That's not to say that we can build onto it and it won't build, but I think the goal right now, if you remember back to when we did the 2023 updates, was to, hey, we left chapter 7.7 or section 7.7 alone because the town council was working on a bunch of affordable housing initiatives, looking at different funding sources and structures. And so now we want to take what happened last year, all that good work, and then codify it in some way. So we're kind of pushing the envelope, if you will, with some concepts out there. But at the moment, I don't think we want to get too far into weeds. I think what we want to do is talk through concepts. What concepts make sense? So we were looking at industry standards, national trends, and things like that.
So do you want to just ask us some questions as we go through?
Yeah, I only have a few slides here.
Why don't we let you run this? Why don't we let you run this?
Yeah, so
Ask for comment when you want it.
yeah, I'll just want to give maybe just 5 minutes background here and then just open it up for dialogue and discussion. So you have a lot of the research, you have all the research in your packet, you can refer to it. This is just kind of a summary of it. As we started looking at best practices, they really come into two elements, not it's not so much obvious, but it's not too far-fetched that it makes some sense. Oh yeah, you have code requirements or code elements that incentivize or basically lessen restrictions on affordable housing projects. Those are procedures, those are opportunities, property development, community goals, allowing for smaller scale development, and just coming up with different strategies to develop partnerships to incentivize or allow that what's referred to as the missing middle housing. I would say for the most part, the town is doing a very good job on this. You've already, this is another slide I have later on, so I'm not going to jump ahead. The other side of that coin is financing. So you have the properties and the process to get something done, but you also have the financing mechanisms to it. And so these are some strategies that came from national research about, leveraging public-public partnerships and public-private partnerships, inventorying a bunch of funding sources. And again, I think the town has done a wonderful job on those elements, but then there's also these funding programs where that kind of elevates and moves it forward. But you've already done some of this too, right? Coming up with capital subsidies, coming up with a grant or loan program, deed restriction management program, tax incentives, right? There's a lot on the funding side. So anyways, those are kind of the two big elements when we start thinking about affordable housing. And what are we doing right now? We just finished talking about ADUs. A major part of that is affordable housing, small scale development. You've already done that. Reduce the lot size, allow larger footprint buildings on smaller lots. Reducing parking standards, we're doing that. Deed restriction units, we're starting to do that. The program is sort of in place, and I know there's also been some talk about fee in lieu of affordable housing program. I can't remember exactly where this one landed, Preston. I couldn't remember it, but inclusionary zoning has definitely been in the conversation, and whether or not this is something that we want to do or not is something we can certainly do through this process. And then coming up with a way to manage the deed restrictions. We've already seen that this is becoming an administrative challenge given the resources. So if the county or the region or the town are going to be taking some strong initiatives over the next couple of years, coming up with a way to manage all of those is certainly going to be a struggle, or at least a challenge to identify that. And then of course, not within the code requirements necessarily, or the code purview. We've looked at some peer communities, and some of these are outlined in the research, so I won't go through it all. But as you mentioned, Michelle, you've seen Telluride up front and personal, and Preston specifically asked us to look at Telluride and what their program was, which is why it takes up a lot of real estate on the report or the research. We also looked at Basalt, others in the Roaring Fork Valley, Carbondale and Glenwood Springs, and have, of course, other experience elsewhere. So that's in general kind of the what we did at the moment. Have some obviously some stuff to build off of, but really at this moment we want to say, what is it that I guess I should also mention that in the research, where'd that go? Oh, here it is. There are some questions, and those might be good. They're in the kind of the orange text boxes throughout the document that we're hopefully put out there to kind of just start the juices flowing and thinking about, hey, what does affordable housing programs mean to Ridgway? So with that, I'll kind of just leave it there and open it up for discussion. Again, not trying to get too far into the weeds on this stuff. But hey, what program should we start thinking about? What incentives? Beyond what we've already talked about as well. And where we should go from here.
I have a question that might be useful in the discussion, which is what do we have in place now? Do we have a fee and lieu program? Like what does Ridgway have? Anything?
Nothing that we bank for it.
I guess
The last three we don't have. We've been talking about for a long time. All three of those, and we're not there yet.
We have the inclusionary zoning provisions within the PUD section now, right, TJ?
Oh, that's right.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, we incentivize. So if you do these things, we'll give you credits, right? And that's how we've done it. But there is no standard requirement.
What about, there's some deed restricted units, aren't there?
Oh, yeah, that's what John was saying. We've got all but the last three we've done or are working on now. The fee in lieu is one that we had talked about quite a bit on council.
I'd like to make a suggestion here and add to the fee in lieu to land in lieu also as instead of a check. John and I have talked about this at length, and we might change that language so they would see that and maybe focus on it. So if they gave us a chunk of land instead of building some apartments, that we wouldn't be interested in that, or building some units. I think that would be smart. I actually like land in lieu better than anything, but it's just.
Do you have any units where instead of providing them on site, they bought them from the free market and put a deed restriction on them?
No.
Is that an option here yet?
I think providing units.
I think that's a big one. I think that's, I mean, a lot of places, it was probably better before prices went up so much, but a lot of places don't want them necessarily on site, so they would buy a free market unit and put a deed restriction on it, which would promptly lower the value on it, the price on it.
That's a good option. I mean, as long as they provide us units, I guess we don't care if it's in their development.
That way it just doesn't have to be on site, right? That's the big one in Tyrone. It could be on site, it could be off site where you buy it, out of the free market, or you can put money into the affordable housing fund.
I think Michelle's hit on something. We need to be as flexible as possible to create these units.
And I guess the fourth would be build them off site on a different piece of property.
I think that's a great idea.
So it seems like if it's just writing and you're borrowing this language from other communities, so if it's just putting these options into writing, we're like, yeah, that's great, TJ, have at it.
Yeah, I mean, Telluride is a great toolbox, and so does Eagle County.
When they've worked on it for a long time, they have 3 different deed restrictions up there, a different one for Mountain Village, Town of Telluride, and County. They're all different.
Yeah, I guess
that's just how it went.
Mm-hmm.
So I would think that we could at least, you guys can chime in, but we would at least say, yeah, start putting some of this stuff in writing. Certainly the obvious things. And then we can look at that and say, yeah, this is what we have in mind, or no, this needs to be stricter or not as strict.
I think we need to offer an outline. In the past, it's been the rumor that Ridgway wants 10% units, but it's never been really enforced. And
we changed that number to 25.
Never been formalized. This board has been real successful accomplishing that, but it's never been formal. And I think we need to be more formal about it.
It's a debate that Jen Coates and I always had. She was a big believer in the inclusionary zoning in a hard and fast way was more limiting. And if you could do it through negotiation, you're more likely to get a better number. I don't see that we've been able to accomplish that. We've never gotten 10%.
I thought you've done really good, John.
We've done fine, but her theory was that it's, instead of putting in a hard and fast 15 or 20% inclusionary zoning requirement, you say like, kind of like what we built into the latest code changes we've done, where we've incentivized it, right? Instead of making it a requirement.
And my point from other resort areas where I've lived is they will always rather write the check than build the building.
Then you make sure the check amount is high enough that it's not better to do that.
Yeah, I think we should raise the dollars disproportionate to the unit number. I mean, we can figure that out.
But if we want them to actually help us build a community, we want them to actually build the units.
I'm with Pam.
Well, if they're writing a check and they don't want it in their development, and they give us more money not to have it in their development, I'm okay with that.
It's, well, the only way, it would have to be more money than they actually would spend. Is that what you're saying?
Like, no.
More money than it would cost them to
Yeah.
build the unit in their development.
Yeah.
It has to, the number has to be really
Yeah.
high.
Yeah, I don't. I've seen it go wrong so many times. I'm not in favor of giving them any wiggle room at all, because they will find it and take it.
And the reason I agree with that is because the money's one thing, but the town doesn't want to be a developer. We don't want to be in the business.
We have the home trust.
And that's a good point. But it's not just the money, it's the infrastructure, it's the overhead to make it happen.
There's also
Cost of building.
opportunities where the town might get an opportunity to buy something and keep a deed restriction on it, but if they don't have any money or a fund, then they can't.
Well, I'm hoping that
I think we have
donated.
Yeah,
What'd you say?
I'm hoping we get some land donated to us and then we can parlay that into grants. I mean, I'm not as experienced with some of this as some of the other people like Preston is, but I think we can take a half acre of land or a nice chunk of land and leverage that with grants and funding. We can really increase the units by just getting a deed as opposed to just a couple of houses.
yeah, I don't think fee and lieu is always a bad idea,
I like
because if
land.
it's on site, you're gonna get the smallest, darkest
Yes.
corner of the development over by the trash containers.
On the other side of the track.
It's not all like romantic, you're up there in the penthouse with everybody else.
On the other side.
You're over in the little shitty part, so if the town had a fund where they could actually do something. When they get the opportunity, like they get some land, well, how do we build something on it if we don't have any money? Well, if we have a fee and lieu, maybe we've gotten some money together to do something.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I like the idea of land in lieu of.
I love it. We can leverage
Land is land,
Land,
they're not making any more of it.
because then you can push
Well, we can rezone it if we own it, make it more dense.
Yep.
Then we'd allow them to do so.
It's the one
I
thing
like
we
it.
can, as a town, have.
Great tool for land making.
Right.
TJ, what do you think about that?
Missed that little bit there, the land.
Land in lieu.
Land in lieu of,
We'll
instead
take
of fee in lieu of.
We'll take cash in lieu, but we prefer land in lieu.
It's almost like the school district fee, you know, everybody requires a dedication of land for the school district. But I guess you probably want to identify the property that you want. And then that's what you want. You don't want just some random place for it, right?
Well, we are talking about the town limits of Ridgway, so there's not that much land.
Right.
You know, oh, that's no good.
because once you have
I
land.
think that's a good point, TJ. If we have a developer come in and we want to buy a piece from the Ridgway School Board that we like, and we don't have the money to give the school board, we can have that developer buy it for us. Or, I mean, I'm a land guy, I like land, so, I mean, I think John is right saying that we need to be able to negotiate with this, and maybe Jen's right, it doesn't need to be steadfast. So,
Well, so how I've seen it done and potentially could work in both is that you establish a dedication requirement. And so the standard is you need to dedicate X units or X something, right? And that can then relate to either cash in lieu or property dedication. And so there are other ways that, you know, but it all has to start with a standard something, and that standard something is generally a number of units and then prioritized from there.
then you say a number of units as a percentage.
Correct. Yep.
And most resort towns have had to go from 10 to 15 to 25% because they didn't do it early enough. And now they're trying to play catch up. So if it's land that we can then go find federal money or public partnerships, that's one thing. But I don't agree with cash in lieu at all. You got that? Oh, yeah. I just seen it. So
Yeah, I think
It doesn't mean that it always goes wrong. There's ways to do it.
Well, I think just brainstorming here and from a developer point of view, if let's just say he has to produce 5 units, to write a check for 5 units, it'd be cheap for him to give us the land for 5 units because it costs less. So I think we should incentivize the land part of this, but that's just me. So for him, he goes buys a piece of land, say 5 acres, and he's going to give us enough for 5 units, and he gives us that land. I think it's a windfall. If you had to build those 5 units, that's a much bigger number for him.
Yeah,
We need to think
we've
through
got
that.
the land and we seek the grants.
Yeah, with the land, we can parlay big time.
provided it's a useful piece of land, right? And I know that's all.
Yeah,
Not a wetland.
Yeah,
really smart. I mean, I think we can write that into the regulation that says, you know.
I think TJ's point that it has to be usable land. You know, it's got to have some developable qualities to it.
Right. It doesn't give us what we want, we're going through.
Yeah, but what I'm hearing though, and this has been really good so far, is developing a number of coming up with a calculation that gets us a number of units based on the proposal. Coming up with an opportunity for the town to those then to be met in a number of ways. One, build them. 2, purchase another market rate and put an affordable a deed restriction on it. And that is actually a big one with Vail Health. I was working in a project over in Eagle County. They purchased a lot of units kind of throughout the county to meet their affordable housing component, which was actually very successful. And then have the fee in lieu, the land in lieu, and then the fee or cash in lieu, and kind of up those kind of as you go along to make it easiest, maybe quote unquote easiest for whoever the developer is to create the unit at that time and transfer the unit as opposed to anything else.
What's inclusionary zoning?
That's a requirement on any new development that X percentage of their housing units be deed restricted.
We put 25% in.
We did, but not
PUDs or PUDs.
Yeah.
And we were trying to discourage PUD.
Yeah.
And yes, I would think that at some point having an agency that manages this stuff is going to be necessary, but I suppose you get inventory first.
Yeah, so there's actually a meeting coming up later in June. City, county, and town are all talking about the need for housing authority or not.
That's
So
great.
Forming a
that
regional
is coming.
entity.
Because that business that we talked about with the AMI and the, making sure your renter is qualified, all that would go through one agency where it's the same across the board.
Typically, it's a housing authority, and we're trying to avoid having to go down that very expensive path. So
Because the overhead, the staff and everything.
staff, insurance, and all, it's a very restrictive thing. And we also have so many housing authorities in the region. I just think, from my perspective anyway, that what we're trying to do in Erie County is just be a little bit more kind of thinking outside the box. And a combination of this 3 government agency housing committee and like the home trust, we're just exploring.
But like a housing authority consultant is what you.
Kind of.
Not an actual entity.
Housing services provider.
Like TJ's office probably offers that, or they're going to.
TJ, I have a funny question. In your document here, very far up at the top, under strategies to support construction and development, item number 2, identify gaps, obstacles, opportunities in the BP and public review process. What is BP?
Building.
Building permit.
That oil company that had that big spill down.
Grants.
I didn't come up with building permit for some reason. Thank you.
One of the
What
other,
else? What other questions you got for us before we head off in some other direction?
I think he just wants our take on these points here.
one of the other things I've noticed in here is that he's got some short-term housing regulatory fees, and what I heard ours are $400.
I don't think I can hear you, Russ.
Yeah, but he's got this comment here about Breckenridge, Pagosa Springs, and Estes Park. Their regulatory fees for short-term rentals are $400. Looks like a drop in the bucket here. So Breckenridge at $756, Pagosa at $1,800, and this is per bedroom. And Estes Park at $1,590 per bedroom. Is the housing regulatory fees?
I'm in favor of short-term.
I am too.
I'm in favor of increasing the fees on short-term rent.
Yeah.
Can you give us
Absolutely.
Can you give us a little more background on that for next time, TJ?
I actually don't know if I can, because Max did all of this.
No, he said for next time. We're not calling you out right now.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
next.
Oh, there we go. 3 Colorado communities have short-term housing regulatory fees. Yeah, so I think the idea behind it is setting up a fee schedule that then funds the affordable program. So yeah, I'll get more on that. Exactly what that is and how those work, but yeah.
I don't remember seeing anything like that in the STR research that we did before coming up with our permit fee. So I'm just really surprised that anybody has numbers that are that high per bedroom.
I bet you the Telluride one's pretty damn high.
Well, actually, it says current annual business license is $330 plus 44 per bedroom.
Plus how much per bedroom?
That's 44.
44.
$44.
So,
$44.
yeah, $44. But it says that with that, they collected $170,000 for the housing fund in 2022.
Which isn't that big a number.
It's not, but it's also referencing these other communities. It'd be interesting just to see what they've done and how that's assisted them, and I'm assuming it's going to affordable housing or something along those lines.
I mean, I don't, this is going in the weeds, but we could disincentivize short-term rental and encourage long-term affordable housing rental that way. So maybe they don't want a short-term rental at house and let it go long-term. That would be my goal.
It's so interesting because there was a huge hullabaloo when the city of Uray instituted their short-term rental fee.
Yeah.
Which I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't anywhere near this high.
Right, right.
But that was before COVID too.
John, it's harder to implement a fee than it is to raise it.
Talking about their excise tax,
Yeah, is that it? Yeah, that.
the highest in the world,
Is it?
what Silas says.
But it's like $500 or something.
Oh, well, I don't know. I mean, it's 15%.
Oh, it's 15%.
Yeah, but you just don't do it as a tax, right? You do it as a fee.
Right.
Yeah.
Students affordable housing fee.
I'm just curious.
It should pay for its regulation.
The license is $500, your affordable housing fee is 15%.
I'm really curious how the Pagosa Springs community got behind $1,800 per bedroom.
Yeah.
They don't want they don't want short-term rentals, so they got behind it.
They have
Well,
no
but you-
affordable housing.
You know for a fact that the real estate community and
Those bastards.
the property
The
manager,
hell with the real estate community, I don't feel like they represent the housing we need.
well, they don't. I mean, I
That's
said
not
that
their
for
job.
years.
It's not, I don't think it's their job, they think it's our job.
And
And it is.
Pagosa,
They
you
take
decided
it
it's like the upfront application or renewal fee of $1,800. Is that what I heard? I just,
It's the licensing regulatory fee of $1,800 per bedroom.
That's why I asked for a little more background on these fees, where, how they,
I'd love to read about
where they
Yeah,
come from.
Regulatory fees.
It's maybe, so if it's just an annual fee per bedroom, that's a pretty good chunk, but
That is a really,
it probably doesn't deter folks who are short-term renting. Well, no, I'm just thinking out loud, like,
right,
a reg, right, it's still a drop in the bucket, for the most part, which makes ours a real small drop in the bucket.
Exactly,
So,
somewhere else in here I saw Telluride's. They only allowed like 29 days a year.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's near the end of this section.
Yeah, STRs are limited to 29 nights per year in Telluride residential zones. That's insane.
Dallas, Texas just outlawed short-term rental on all of their residential zone.
Just completely
Out in any residential zone, no short-term rentals.
interesting.
This is a big national movement.
Now
Because
we've
it's
got rid of
destroying
all of them
places.
too, because of the burn.
So like we could, if, to implement something like that, we could say, you know, if somebody turns in a permit, a license, we eliminate it, we don't put it back out.
I don't know that I'm in favor of going that far, but I think we should tax them. I mean, I think we should make it expensive to do that, and hopefully they'll offer employee housing. I mean, I would rather incentivize them to keep a rental, but make it long-term as opposed to short-term. And I've done a bunch of short-term rentals. I have experience in them. Short-term rentals are high maintenance, they're lots of wear and tear, high parking, they're not conducive to community.
Not at all. That's why I only do one term.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
We can incentivize them to move them the way we want them to.
What else, TJ?
There is another comment here I want to address here in Carbondale. I like this one. They have a guideline that on-site housing is preferred or within the urban growth.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
It said, they have a guideline that says it's the kind of the in lieu, but it says on-site housing is preferred or within the urban growth boundary.
Which is what,
So just kind of keeping everything in versus what Michelle was talking about and putting a low-end residence out in not so nice a place. I don't know where that would be.
No, I mean, the urban growth boundaries in the county here. So, I mean,
Yeah,
urban growth boundary, ETJ, is the city limits is what they're talking about there, so.
Yep.
Well, that's not what I was saying, Russ. I was saying that if there's a whole complex and you make them put some affordable housing in it, it's gonna be in the least
It's gonna be by the hospital.
I mean, it's-
desirable area.
yeah, like the one across the street.
Or it's not built for like 10 years.
Shorter and
Yeah,
stuck over.
yeah. So that maybe it's okay that if we build it, because it would, that would be the case.
how many short-term licenses do we have? 15. That's not many. I was just curious.
we based that number on being roughly 10% of our stock.
I think 50 is a good number, especially if we haven't used them all up. We've seen.
They were all used at one point.
They were maxed out until this year, then all of a sudden, more people surrendered. Well, just couldn't afford it.
at some
I
point,
think that's good.
in late 2022 or something, there was a run on it. We were hovering right around 40 for a long time.
Yes.
3-month period.
During COVID,
No, it was after.
22.
after COVID. I think we should pay attention to it, so.
Yeah, TJ, I think we're losing steam on this one.
Yeah, what else?
No, I think that I think I got enough guidance to, of course, we're not going to learned our lesson. We're not going to be so optimistic to say, hey, we're going to be hit it right on the head next time. But what we could do is come up with some language on each of these concepts, or however that flushes out, and start getting a little bit more granular on some of them next time.
I just want to bring up, and maybe it's for the future, but I really like strategy number 5, to take inventory of the land supplies. So there's I feel like there's a lot of vacant places here, especially on the other side of the highway, and watching stuff on affordable housing. I think it's great ideas that you take stuff that's already there you know, there's houses over there, there's buildings over there that are empty, that I would like to see people be incentivized to take those and make them into affordable housing instead of doing a new development.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point too, and would be part of. Well, I'm not sure where it falls, but certainly a lot of communities through actually through the planning capacity grant through DOLA is using that to do inventories just like you're talking about and identify. And I was kind of alluding to it when we were talking about fee in lieu or sorry, not fee in lieu, land in lieu. Identify those areas in town. Identify where there are vacant properties or underutilized properties or you know, things like that where there's already infrastructure, there's already costs, you know, to help that. And I think that certainly has to be a major component of it. We're actually going to be embarking on that very similar project, doing an inventory of land in town of Kremling early next month, and doing just that, identifying where the best places for redevelopment and affordable housing development are going to be. And the idea is get that ahead of the game, and then you can start requiring it, just like you do on your trails, right? Our trail connection is going to go through here. So the next time a developer comes in, you have it what's called an exaction. It says, okay, you're developing this area, you need to dedicate that trail. Look at affordable housing. You know, it took me a long time to get around to this, and I'm getting there. That over the last couple of years, there's been this movement to look at affordable housing as a utility. Just like a water line requirement expansion, right? It is a vital service of local government, affordable housing. And so doing it just the same way, you have trail system, your parks network, right? And I think the inventory is the big part of that. And the reason I'm going on about it right now is because that could be a very plausible, depending on how these projects come together, next step for the land inventory and the land use portfolio that we're working on. You know, as we start looking, and we've been building that to try to help with an inventory that may or may not come in the future. So sorry, I'll get off my little soapbox.
I like it.
No, it's
I like
good, thanks.
No, I think that we recently, not real recently, but we were offered $500,000 for affordable housing. And we're like, what are we gonna do with $500,000? So if we have something we want to focus on,
Right.
and somebody decides they want to offer us a check like that, we'll know what to do with it.
Yep, and then you have an inventory. You can use that to leverage grant money to go purchase. That
I was gonna say, didn't the state just like supposedly put a bunch of money available for affordable housing?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, there's millions and millions, hundreds of millions coming
The
for.
federal government's doing, there's so much money out there, it's ridiculous.
We should get some of it.
Prop 1, 2, 3, we're working on it.
But you have to have projects in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need a project.
They opted in, which is the first step, so that's good
What was the first step?
Opted in.
to opt in.
Well, I've got a project in mind for you.
We actually, to continue our eligibility, we have to come up with 2 or 3 units in the next 2 years.
Nine by 2026, so a certain percentage.
I thought it was like 2 to 3 per year.
Yeah, right, yeah, it's, yeah, like 3 a year, but 9 by 2026, whatever that deadline is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the project. That's where it is.
Yeah.
And Preston and everyone, the major component of that. So Prop 123 has 3 elements. It's your base number that you just talked about, that's your 9, has expedited review process, and then it has a compliance reporting. DOLA is still working on the compliance side of it, but the expedited review process means that anything that meets the state definition of affordable housing needs to go through a 90-day review process. So there might be some part of the affordable housing component might be a quote unquote expedited review process for those as well. And you have a pretty quick one. There's a pretty quick process in Ridgway already. But we might want to, through this as well, look at developing call it a fast lane for certain types of projects to be sure that you're continually eligible for Prop 123 money.
We laid the groundwork for this fast lane when we did Winter One. So we have that informally, we'll just need to put that formally in place at some point.
So I remember a while back at council, we had, I believe it was Ben Jackson came in and talked to us about some of the stuff that we're doing. I'll tell you right, was that the mitigation fee? Do you remember that?
He talked about I think they have a building permit. They have like an affordable housing mitigation fee that's assessed at the time of building permit, or something like that. I don't know much about the formula, but that's what I recall.
Is that this mitigation fee you've got in here? TJ? In this early section under Telluride?
Which section in the Telluride?
Under Telluride, it's early on, it's like the second page under Telluride, where it's talking about the mitigation fees. Calculation of affordable housing mitigation is employees generated times square feet of minimum employee living space times percentage of mitigation.
That's what that means.
Yep.
Okay. And that one, as I recall, seemed to have some relatively attractive on being able to help build the coffers or get things built.
They put that in place 30 years ago.
Pretty impressive.
And they were still behind the ball. We still don't have enough housing.
Right?
I would encourage everybody to go through this again with a fine tooth comb and start writing down some thoughts.
Yep.
In answer to those questions.
It was a big document to grab a hold of real quick.
Yeah.
But for Greg Terrell, thanks for pulling all that together.
But it was great work to help Max. Thanks for us.
Yep.
Yes.
Will do.
Is he off on a trip?
Vacation.
Yeah, well, he went to go visit his family back in Buffalo, New York.
Shut up.
That's where.
Are you making a joke?
No, that's
Oh
right.
my God, I had to do that for 30 years. That's right. Everybody go off to exotic places and I go back to Buffalo to see my family.
Shut one off. Buffalo.
That's classic.
I think Buffalo's exotic.
December.
I haven't been there in 5 years now. Oh my God, every year.
JJ, just one.
Okay, we got two more things to go through.
In parking,
We have the
Don't back it up. Yeah.
land use portfolio update. And then the minutes.
All right, keep going, TJ, keep going. I can't believe Max is in Buffalo.
You had a question.
I had a typo that I noticed in parking. Page 263C, the table says in EV space is required, but the paragraph says it's recommended. Just wanted to clarify that.
6. Sorry, can you say that section again?
63C, where am I? Let me go find it again, 6C. 6C. Any new development within 15 feet or more designated parking spaces. There's a little table.
Oh, sorry, on the wrong. 6.
C. Parking.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a little table that says number of EV ready spaces required. The paragraph says recommended, or it's strongly encouraged. That's what it says.
Yep.
Just wanted to, okay.
Thank you. Good catch.
Thank you. That was it.
And it seems like these, the last memo before the minutes, the land use portfolio update is basically just that, just kind of an update that this particular firm is working on getting us more info for June. Is that right?
That is correct. We met with Elliot 2 weeks ago and realized that there was a drop in communication, that he wasn't getting the information he needed. So we started, our team created a spreadsheet for him with all of the data that he needs, and got it over to him. And we're also creating maps and things of that nature too. So again, trying to set it up for different types of analysis or inventory or a plan of some sort as well. So, yep, that's coming right along, and there should be some more substantive updates next month.
Anything else on that?
Not on my end.
All right, I need an approval of last month's minutes.
So.
Second.
John, or second.
We need a roll call vote, I guess, because we're not here in person.
Commissioner Forster,
Aye.
Les,
Aye.
Petroselli,
Aye.
Meyer, Clark,
Right?
Montague.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous.
What else? Anything? John, what do you got?
I've got something I'd like to talk about. What's going on with the annexation of the triangle out there by the old Abbott gravel pit? Did that go through? That little piece, they were looking for a sword pond that we talked about.
The
The
preserve?
preserve, the preserve, the little triangle. What's going on with the preserve?
Awaiting their annexation application. Their preliminary plat approval currently expires in September. Which reports then and staff time to figure out what the realistic time frame for them is to do the annexation process and meet all the conditions assigned to the plat approval.
Remember that plat approval had like pages.
A lot.
Yeah. From years ago. They're thinking about bringing that in.
Are they thinking about what?
We're actually subdividing it. And bringing the plat into us.
There's no subdivision involved. It's just the little triangle across from the preserve is just to clean up
Yeah. Richmond was saying that they're annexing that to go forward with the preliminary.
Right.
But they're part of
the preliminary.
their part of the deal is just to be able to move the lift station out and yeah, then they.
But ultimately, they'll be establishing, I don't remember off the top of my head, but 20 something, maybe low 30 something lots.
It's about 20. So yeah, my question is not about the triangle. My question is, are they thinking about bringing that preliminary plat to fruition and bringing it to us after they get the annexation?
They claim they are, but we'll see it when we see it.
Remember, there was a lot of conditions on that.
What?
That'll be Ridgway?
Yeah, it's Ridgway.
It's across the.
Are there any other subdivisions besides that one working? We're across the side field.
Iron Rail is not really a subdivision.
I guess, the co-housing kind of evaporated.
Yeah, it's back on the market.
Decided to sell. Oh,
Like, you know,
Ridgway Light Industrial Phase 3. Jack, you want to tell us about that one?
Well, we're gonna be in front of a plat in a month. I mean, Ridgway, we're hoping to have approved plans to start construction on the extension of Lower Street, maybe within a month or so. And so that's happening, and that'll be a plat in front of what the extension of the plat in front of the town council in a month or so, but construction should be happening on that soon. And then they're gonna come in for some zoning change. That's gonna become pretty active in our agenda going forward, but there's no real subdivisions there, and we're just gonna build the street as it was originally platted 25 years ago today. But then it'll bring activity here, but there's none contemplated today. I mean, the owners might as well talk about, the owners are talking about asking for some workforce housing in the above there, and so that would be a big deal because we don't have a workforce housing zone. So that's.
we talked about
Yeah,
workforce housing on.
We did have a proposal, Ben Jackson?
Well, Ben Jackson wanted to do some residential stuff there that I was opposed to. This would be workforce housing used by units, people that own the building, wouldn't be
far enough from the sewer plant.
Yeah, so I mean, that's coming in, like, it's gonna help you about that purpose, but, so we're building a street, but that's about all we're doing right now.
What about Liddell? What's happening on Liddell?
I don't think Iron rail, is that what you're trying? I
Yeah,
don't think anything.
If there's any reason not to.
Yeah, nothing's happening with that.
And
Project.
Matt McIsaac still needs to do his final plat, right?
Yeah, but he's decided to forge ahead with all the other infrastructure required to support the project. I think wisely chose to just build out all the curb gutter and sidewalk and finish the stormwater stuff necessary because I think the thought, they were behind the 8 ball in submitting the final plat application and then thought, oh, let's hustle and get it in. And it's more than you think to actually submit applications.
They're forming the curb and gutter on North Forum.
That's the project, that's the McIsaac project, right on,
Behind.
on Charles and,
Right across from Orange.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Anything else we need to know?
I told you about the meeting
About,
on
the
the
housing.
housing authority.
Yeah.
oh, right, yep.
Which
All
county?
right, nothing else? Keep adjourned.
Thanks, TJ.
Thanks,
Thanks,
TJ.
Bill.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay.
Thank you. See you in person next time.
Good, looking forward to it.